Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines, Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of malted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GC. Hey, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Boom! Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio/RV dining room, located directly inside America. Welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Once again, your host of Operation GCD, JJ Vance here, and perhaps more notably, not the vice president. However, I will be your, thanks for joining me here, folks. We'll be your pilot and navigator here tonight for this shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And I got a real barn burner on deck for you folks here on a Patreon preview here of the Operation GCD Sundaze. It's the first volume here in the Operation GCD Sundaze, which for folks just joining us here and new to the subject, the Sundays here on Operation GCD, a Patreon-only show where I will be doing my general Operation GCD analysis of a lot of incidents of true crime and high weirdness, if you will. Incidents that I've encountered in my adventures in my life and issues that have interested me. And in fact, we're starting that journey with the Curse of Robert the Doll. And if you folks into the web of Robert the Doll, that is. So I was doing some Air Force business back during my Air Force career. When I say my adventures, I traveled most of America and the world for about 20 years in the Air Force military police. But, besides that, I've just generally found myself in strange incidents of high weirdness throughout my life. I like to say it kind of follows me around. But before I met Robert here in August of 2012, I did not have I would never describe any elements of my life as cursed or of misfortune. However, I've had a series of unfortunate events since meeting Mr. Robert the Doll here, and it was an incident that I didn't intend to stumble upon old Robert. And I don't even like be quite honest with you, folks. I don't even like looking at the doll, to be quite honest with you. So I've Muppetized him, been on a real Muppet bender recently. So I made a Muppet of Robert the Doll and his little sidekick. So it is Robert the Doll who sits in a museum in Key West, Florida. It's an old Civil War fort, and I had never heard of Robert the Doll prior to August of 2013. Yeah, 2013. Disregard August of 2012. It's almost 13 years since I've first encountered old Robert here, and it's for many years I didn't quite honestly didn't buy into the curse. And the curse of old Robert is, he's allegedly a haunted doll, and if you don't ask him permission to take a photograph with him, well, then apparently you find yourself under the curse of old Robert here. It's an interesting tale. Nonetheless, I had no idea about it. I had stumbled into the Civil War fort, the old Civil War fort in Key West. Like I said, doing in South Florida, doing some Air Force business. Had some time to burn. Stumbled in there to, check out the scene because many folks here have listened to Operation GCD. They hear me discuss things such as mounds and the secret society that started America, the Society of the Cincinnati, and the descendants of which are all still, in my opinion, running America today. It's a hereditary organization where the members of George Washington's army, the officers, that is, their membership, they were the original members, and membership is passed down in a hereditary fashion, like a modern day knighthood, largely through the paternal lines of these men. However, that sometimes ventures, but most of which these, for example, the Civil War generals specifically, and many of the officer corps were also members of this organization through their hereditary lineage as descendants from the officers of the Revolutionary War. And one thing that all of these folks like to do is do mound stuff. So that's what brought me to that museum that day to meet old Robert. And I'm not the only one to fallen victim, apparently, to Robert's curses, as he's encased in a glass container there in that old Civil War fort. And there's a long list of folks who have apologized and written letters to Robert to try to lift the curse of Robert the Doll. So it's a lot of mysteries kind of surrounding where how he was cursed, where that became from, but where that started. But I've done my analysis on kind of the folks involved in the circumstances and whatnot and everything else. So folks want to dive more into that, obviously stick around on the Patreon side, and the link here is in the description of this here preview. Nonetheless, it'll also be over there. If you can't join us for the live, it'll remain over there for the recorded version of the video and the RSS podcast version over there on Patreon as well. But it was my interest in these mounds and the Civil War fort there, the East Martello Fort. I'm trying to find a picture over here. I got it somewhere of in Key West, Florida, of the Civil War that brought me down there. And it is a story not that different from looking into the history of some of these folks. So once I started diving into the history of the folks involved in this tale, as I often say, that most things we know about in American culture, or, as I like to say, all conspiracies in America, all parapolitical conspiracies, if you will, all roads go back to the Society of the Cincinnati. And, quite honestly, that's not that different than for Mr. Robert the Doll here. We're his owners and their lineage and ancestry. But he sits here today in the Fort East Martello Museum, and there's no signs. There's no warnings. They're not, if you go in there, they're going to tell you that's a haunted doll, but they're going to tell you don't take a photograph with it. But I said, cursed dolls, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to take this photograph, and took a photograph with Robert. And I, looking back now, it's a bad decision. Poor decision on my part, but Nonetheless, this is a Civil War fort built on a mound. And again, it is that organization that started America that built a lot of important government facilities and forts and everything else on mounds. And I have a general theory. I had adapted it long before my encounters with Mr. Robert the Doll here back in 2012. My general theory is a lot weird shit happens in and around these mound sites. So these mound sites are the what I call the ancient architecture of America, and they were largely used for ritual purposes, at least the ones that this organization built their structures on, the Society of Cincinnati folks. And it is a common trend, even through the Civil War and Revolutionary War, et cetera, building these sites on mounds. Masonic lodges, often, especially at the early onset of the settlement of America, were built on these mound sites. And once again, the Masons play a role in this story too. So, as far as the ownership and the folks here who owned Robert the Doll. And while Robert the Doll has an interesting history regarding this curse, he also kind of has an interesting history as far as his origin story, because allegedly he was a unique doll made by the folks who invented the teddy bear. So some deep historical aspects of this. Now, in pop culture, there's been a lot of pop culture that's been spawned from Robert the Doll, from film to books to TV shows, etc. It's often described that Chucky from Child's Play, whom I Muppetized here as well, was inspired by Robert the Doll. Now, I don't know if that's accurate. There are statements available from the writer of Child's Play that's saying that that's not accurate. However, I mean, they're both little demonic dolls, and a lot of the attributes that are attributed, or a lot of the characteristics attributed to Chucky here, there's stories and legends that seem to predate those films regarding Robert the Doll. So whether or not it's directly linked, they do parallel one another as far as some of the tales go. And like I said, you could be wandering into a Civil War fort because you're interested in history and these mounds in which this nation was built upon, and suddenly you find yourself haunted by this little demonic creature, Robert the Doll. And I think it's flagrant, and I try not to look at Robert the Doll. I try not to think of Robert the Doll. And like I said, for many years, I even wrestled with the idea that I was cursed, so kind of became a thing like every December or so, probably starting around 2018, I think, is when I first started evaluating the situations and thinking about every December, thinking, wow, this is a shitty year. I wonder if I'm cursed. I wonder if that is real. Robert the Doll's a real curse. I don't know. I mean, I tend to think more and more. I'm at this point in time, I'm kind of over the fence, if you will, on the matter. And I'm one of those people that wrote a letter to Robert back in December of this past year. And I don't know if the mail didn't get there or what, but I'm not sure if the curse has been lifted. But when I say it's flagrant to just have this haunted doll that can randomly curse folks, and again, I'm not the only one that, these folks do flagrant stuff with these damn cursed dolls, because apparently they're moving Robert around the U.S. now and taking him to places. I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that at all. That sounds like you're just infecting other cities with this curse, to be quite honest with you. Will Robert the Doll really be in the 2024 Fantasy Fest parade? Let's hope not. I don't know if that happened or not, to be quite honest with you, but that one was in Key West, I guess, specifically. But he has been traveling to other sites, this Robert the Doll. And in fact, it's not the only doll. That Annabelle doll apparently did the real haunted Annabelle doll vanish. Apparently, they were traveling, the owners of this doll, from the again, these haunted dolls. Apparently, I'm not big into these horror genres or whatnot, but apparently, again, I don't need to be. I live the curse of Robert the Doll. So why would I want to go see that in Hollywood, right? But apparently, Annabelle here, she spawned her own films. This is the 2014 Hollywood film Annabelle. But I would say the owners of the Robert the Doll and whoever's transporting these haunted dolls like Annabelle around, they need to take it down a notch, because I'm telling you right now, from nearly 13 years of being cursed by Robert, that we don't need to start spreading these curses, get ourselves a haunted doll epidemic going on. But it seems to be the case that folks have no problems just transporting these things around or losing them. I don't even know. There seems to be a question whether or not the haunted Annabelle dolls even can be found. So that's our tale here tonight, folks, of the interweb. So I hope you folks will join us here on Patreon for that. And like I said, you'll have to click over there on Patreon to that stream to check out on the curse of Robert the doll and some of the histories and circumstances surrounding the doll, the folks around them, other folks' curses and their experiences relative to some of the stuff that I've experienced. So whether or not this thing's haunted or not, I mean, at some point in time, just based upon my own personal experiences, I conceded that this past year. But it seems like the overwhelming amount of evidence and similar activities. I mean, bad things happen to folks, and that's certainly true. But it's the repeated nature of it, and I think there's an argument to be made here that putting a haunted doll on a mound site, not a good idea. Not a good idea. I think the combination of those two may, in fact, spell disaster, even more so than the traveling haunted doll roadshows that they feel comfortable doing. So that's tonight's tale. And then folks of the interwebs, definitely check out future tales here on Operation GCD Sundays. As I said, if you enjoy the Operation GCD analysis here of true crime incidents and incidents of high weirdness, specifically ones that I've encountered in my life, like Robert the doll here, then definitely check out future episodes here on Operation GCD, including, I'm trying to look for next week's show. This is coming up soon. That's not next week. Stand by, please. Next week, we got the legend of Buffalo Jared Revisa. And that's a real barn burner. Much like Robert the doll, I don't like to look at old Buffalo Jared or really think about him too much. In fact, old Buffalo Jared here was fella who had a PR company, strange fella, had a PR company, demanded that I hire him as my PR representative. For months, I avoided these communications, back and forth, maybe a little bit on Twixter publicly, and then later direct messages. And then he, eventually he wanted a phone call with me, and I thought I could have a phone call with this man and tell him I don't need any PR representation. I had communicated that from moment one, but he was not receiving the message. And in fact, his response was, I'm not going to take no for an answer. And sure as shit, he wasn't. So I had forgotten about old Buffalo Jared, even though even after that phone call and limited communications we had over the subsequent 6 months or so after that, he still continued on. I would kind of cyber stalk old Buffalo Jared because he had a PR company based out of like New York City and Beverly Hills. I mean, he had websites. I mean, it at least was a good front. What he was doing, I have no idea, but he never smiled in any photograph. He ran a PR company and he never smiled in. I mean, I gave him a smile on this photograph when I Muppetized him, but he wasn't smiling on this photograph either. In fact, while I'm on the subject, let me just bring up the creepy nature of Buffalo Jared, because that's coming up next week. So Buffalo Jared, after I'd kind of forgotten about him, suddenly last May, I see he's all in the news. Buffalo, his name's Jared Revisa. I call him Buffalo Jared based upon this incident. So apparently, old Buffalo Jared here went trans, part of the transpocalypse. Stabbed a guy in Connecticut, and then went on a multi-state, murdered him. Went on a multi-state stabbing spree. I believe 6 other people, 5 other attempted murders. During that saga of that day, he would go through a McDonald's murdered the man in Connecticut, went to a movie theater in Braintree, Massachusetts, stabbed 4 young girls, slashed them up, I think more so than stabbing. They survived. Everyone but the first victim survived. Then he drove about an hour south of there to Plymouth, Massachusetts, went to a McDonald's, went through the drive-thru, ordered food, went to the drive-thru window, got his food, stabbed them, and apparently was upset with his order. I don't think he paid for it. Then drove around front, pissed on the front window of the McDonald's, went inside, stabbed another employee, and then ran out. And they're saying that one of the eyewitnesses said, as you can kind of see in this picture, he's kind of a creepy looking fellow. This was the early onset, I think, is trans stuff, but he was described as looking like Buffalo Bill. I'm like, that's an accurate description. So, there goes Buffalo Jared. And here, this was actually the scene of the murder in Connecticut days prior to the murder. So the guy that he murdered hired him as his PR rep. So that's Buffalo Jared Revisa. That's coming up next week. And, it's an interesting story. So when I say he's kind of this multi-state transpocalypse assassin fellow, his family are actually famous sports hypnotists and sports psychologists. In fact, if any folks are familiar with the curse of the goat, which was the curse of speaking of all these curses, right? I mean, it's not a Robert the Doll curse, but it was apparently a different curse where the Chicago Cubs were cursed from winning the World Series for nearly 100 years. The man who broke that curse is credited by the Cubs for breaking that curse, was their sports psychologist and sports hypnotist company that they had employed, the Revisa family sports hypnosis and psychology company or whatever. So Ken Revisa, which is Buffalo Jared's great uncle, his father also worked for the company. This was the family business. Buffalo Jared seemed to have branched out at some point and started a PR situation, but he did work for the business at one point. Ken Revisa, again, that's he's an infamous sports psychologist and hypnotist. So when you're talking about mind control assassins, why wouldn't a creepy transpocalypse assassin fellow pop out of a sports hypnosis, an infamous sports hypnosis family, one infamous for breaking curses? So maybe I should give Buffalo Jared a call back. Maybe he can break my curse. I don't know how that works, but that's next week. And then following that, got the legend of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah. He's a cannibalistic, kid-diddling, homicidal, psychopathic serial killer that I came face-to-face with in Great Falls, Montana back in 2001. And prior to his arrest in 2001, he was working at the Hardee's on the late night and allegedly was serving up human meat burgers. I did not always eat at Hardee's, however, on Central Avenue in Great Falls, Montana in the year 2000. However, what's one of my first assignment in the Air Force. However, when I did eat at Hardee's, it was definitely on the late night, and it was definitely the Central Avenue location. So may or may not have eaten a number of drunken human meat burgers served up by Nathaniel Bar-Jonah here. So interesting case in the small town, specifically like Great Falls. Has a lot of eerily similar kind of aspects to the kind of cult ritualistic environment of this matter to Minot, North Dakota of the Son of Sam tales, because not the least of which, besides the satanic ritual homicidal crazy nonsense going on there, you also have the Air Force bases there in Minot and Great Falls, Montana. They have the same missions and are basically organized in a similar fashion regarding these nuclear security missions. So as far as they're part of the same command, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of similarities I think that can be drawn between the two. But I encountered this fella when I got arrested for a DUI. I didn't get charged for a DUI because you never follow the test. It's a much easier way to go. But as a result of not following the tests, I was given the treatment by the local sheriffs there in the county jail before my first sergeant from the Air Force base could come pick me up. And that treatment was they handcuffed me right in front of this guy. This guy's a plexiglass, cell that he was, Hannibal Lecter looking style that he was awaiting trial, sitting in that cell. So at the county lockup. Why he was right there and everything else, I have no idea. He's literally right by the desk, and they pulled a bench over there, handcuffed him to the bench, and said, "Your first sergeant will be here soon." And about an hour later, he showed up, and I was like, "Thank God," because I looked this dude face to face, eye to eye, and I can tell you right now, that's pure evil. And last one I'm gonna plug here before we start the show. The following week, 3 weeks from now, we got the case of Edward Wayne Edwards, the serial killer you had never heard of. And once again, I've obviously muppetized this character. Now, this guy, the lead detective in that case in Great Falls, Montana, on the case of Nathaniel Barjona, was a fellow by the name of Detective John Cameron. And he actually wrote the book on Edward Wayne Edwards here, as far as the tracking this man's life. There's a lot of study needs to be done on this man. He really is the serial killer you've never heard of. He this picture that I muppetized was actually his FBI most wanted picture. I believe at the age of 22, he was the number one. He was top. I think he was number one most wanted person in America. He was definitely top 10. And, he would go on to commit a number of homicides over multiple decades, confirmed as which that he, admitted to, they found evidence of. And he was ultimately trying to seek the death penalty when he was found out through semen that was left on the jeans of a Lover's Lane murder in Wisconsin from 1980. Now, that Lover's Lane murder, again, seemed to be one of his MOs. And the guy who wrote the book on Edward Wayne Edwards here, Detective John Cameron, retired from Great Falls, again, the lead detective on that Nathaniel Barjona case. He's a legit detective. I mean, he did some good work, but sometimes I think he's a little bit off target on his book, where he attributes everything to Edwards, when I think Edwards was more of like a Henry Lee Lucas, like more of a general of the hand of death kind of cult that Henry Lee Lucas speaks of. But nonetheless, Edward Wayne Edwards, definitely a scary dude, and the serial killer you never heard of, and the dude's diabolic. I mean, he wrote a book, published himself, traveled around America after he got out of prison from the FBI most wanted stuff. Was apparently murdering folks the entire time, and he was going on TV and radio stations promoting his book, murdering folks in these different cities allegedly, according to Cameron's book and his research. And I think there's a lot to it. And again, I think where Cameron might get a little off target is attributing all of these high profile murder cases over the years to Edwards, when I think it more is Edwards is like the leader of a group that's doing these things. But nonetheless, Edwards, he makes a strong argument in that book that Edwards was part of the Zodiac killer, I would call a team, but the man in the hooded mask at Lake Berryessa just happened to provide the details of Edward Wayne Edwards' life. So that being said, there was more evidence than that in the book, but I'm looking to focus more on the man, Edward Wayne Edwards, not just the Zodiac stuff. Because again, this dude admittedly and provably murdered folks, Lover's Lane situations, mostly the ones he admitted to and evidence of, over multiple decades. But he started his life allegedly murdering his mother at the age of, I think, 5 or 6. Then he was put into the Chillicothe, Ohio Boys Reformatory School, where he met Charles Manson. So interesting story, this Edward Wayne Edwards, nonetheless. But it is the detective from the Barjona case that was that did the study and research into this man Edwards, and I think there's a lot more to be said about the subject, and I'll be saying a lot more about that here in 3 weeks. But thank you, folks, for the interwebs, for joining me here for this Patreon preview, and for those folks that are looking to explore the curse of Robert the Doll, I hope you join us over on Patreon. If you can't make it here tonight, then you catch this broadcast in the future. It'll be over there on Patreon, both in audio and video format, and hopefully at some point in the future, this damn curse of Robert the Doll will stop, and I don't have to contact Buffalo Jared Revisa, because apparently the Revisa clan is formidable in ending curses, like the curse of the goat from the Chicago Cubs. But anyhow, I will certainly catch you folks here next week on another Patreon preview. If you can't make it tonight, hope to see you then soon. And check out Operation GCD Live on Wednesdays, and Operation GCD and Occult Rejects Fridays. So always a fun roundtable conversation on various conspiracy culture and high weirdness topics with whatever our weekly guest is interested in. So definitely check those out live here on Twixter, Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram. Probably missed something there. I'm not sure. Maybe Facebook. I think I said that. Anyhow, appreciate your time, folks, at the interwebs, and thanks for joining me here to get a little GCD, and catch y'all over on Patreon.
Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines, Operation GCD. copy of American Rebel's design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Boom! Oh. Welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Once again, as a reminder, JJ Vance here, host of OpGCD and not the vice president. But hope you folks here enjoyed the introduction to tonight's tale, Robert the Doll, and be picking up where we left off there, as far as the history of Robert, the folks associated with Robert, where he came from, why he may or may not be cursed, because even that seems to be coming into question. And then, of course, the as you can see here in this image of Robert on, he's got a bunch of letters there in that room. So when I walked into that room back in August of 2012, wandering into this museum, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you know, we got a haunted doll here." I'm like, "Oh, that's weird." Okay. It was described to me that these letters were from folks that had previously not asked Robert the Doll here for permission to take a photograph. Now, you'd think that the destroying this photograph may solve some solutions. I destroyed that long ago, so it's a digital photograph. I mean, it's long not existed, so that didn't solve much. But I don't know if these folks decided to destroy their photographs. But you can see the walls of this room are littered with folks who have met some unfortunate circumstances after encountering Robert the Doll here and not asking for permission for to take that photograph. So the dog, I guess that's a dog. I've seen it described as a lamb, but the object in Robert's lap is apparently Robert's own doing. So there's a story that goes, and at some point in time he had come to life there, you know, in a Chucky Child's Play style. Like I said, the correlations between those two stories, despite the creator claiming that he did not create Chucky based upon Robert the Doll, you know, there are a lot of similarities. So that being said, he came to life, apparently grabbed himself that lamb or dog, and has been with Robert since. So Robert is an interesting story. Like I said, I got some details that day. Largely didn't care about Robert the Doll for many years following. Again, I'd say it was around 2018 before I started considering any of these aspects. And it was that point in time I was like, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that photograph. Just get that out of the way. You know, I don't believe in curses, I told myself at the time, but I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that photograph. And, you know, sometimes I don't know you have to believe in a curse for you to be cursed, but you know, Robert the Doll has an interesting background nonetheless. He apparently it was a unique doll that was made by the creator of the teddy bear. So the that lady, so as the legend goes, Robert was owned here by a fellow by the name of Robert Eugene Otto, and he named his doll Robert after himself. And Robert here was created by the Stife Company around 1904 and gifted to a Key West boy by the name of Robert Eugene Otto, who developed an unusual relationship with the toy. Standing 40 inches tall and stuffed with wool known as Excelsior, Robert the Doll is dressed in a similar sailor suit that once belonged to Otto. Otto being, they typically just called him Gene or Eugene, I believe. And I don't believe he went by Robert. I believe that's why he named his doll Robert. But apparently that was his old sailor suit that he had there. And once bore painted features not unlike those of a jester. That's strange, right? Like a little clown, right? So his unusual size indicates he may have been fashioned in the image of his constant companion. The doll took Robert as his name, while the Otto simply went by Gene. There you go. Together they would go on to make history. So Robert Eugene Otto is actually a man who was born in Key West, and so was his father, and so was his father. So they're a long-time Key West family dating back to the early 1820s. They seem to have come over from Prussia, where they went in between. I'm not quite sure. I couldn't find that out. But it wasn't abnormal for many Prussians to migrate to America around that time. In fact, there was Prussian representation in the Society of the Cincinnati. The one that comes to mind offhand, let's see, no, that's Casimir Pulaski. He was Polish. The Prussian, we had some Prussian, I guess, essentially noblemen from Prussia that came to America to fight for Washington in the Society of the Cincinnati. Was it von Steuben? Maybe General von Steuben. I think he was Prussian. Anyhow, we have there. These folks being Prussians, they're in what I'm getting at is the Otto family were doctors. So they're obviously of an upper crust of society, if you will, coming from Prussia at that time. So just because I'm just saying that just because they're coming to America, or at this point in time Key West, which is very much more like a pirate atmosphere and kind of still is today. But nonetheless, there was other folks of higher elements or classes of European society, especially these royal or noble ranks in their European classes, as they came to America to, not only fight in the war, but also immigrated here. And the Otto family here, Eugene here, that is, Robert Eugene Otto, the owner of Robert, he comes from a line of doctors. So the man who gave him this doll was allegedly his grandfather, Dr. Joseph Otto. And like I said, they're an old school family there in Key West. Here we got Robert Eugene Otto. He was born in 1900 in Key West, and we'll go through his life story a little bit. But like I said, he gets gifted Robert the doll here in 1904 at the age of 4 from his grandfather, Dr. Joseph Otto. This was a notable Key West family, and like I said, dating back to his heritage, because obviously his great grandfather was trained to be a doctor somewhere. So he again, they weren't poor immigrants. They come from wealth of some regard and at least education. And again, they were early settlers in Key West, a place that very much I kind of respect it. It very much has a pirate atmosphere, and that was kind of one of the reasons. Besides the Civil War stuff down there, besides the mound stuff, one of the other elements of history that I wanted to go check out down there was there's actually, I think about that, there's a couple. I didn't make it to this one, but there's a couple Civil War stuff. So this is actually down there just off the shore of Key West. This was a prison during the Civil War and after, and a fort. So a fort and a prison, Fort Jefferson. It's located in what they call the Dry Tortugas. It's about 70 miles off the coast of Key West. It's a whole day excursion to get over there. I believe you can camp. You can take a boat over there, but I'm saying if you take the ferry, it's a whole thing. I couldn't squeeze it into my time, but it's definitely it's quite a monument of architecture, if you ask me. I mean, to build that out in the ocean like that, again, it's a lot of shallow water and whatnot to get out there, but nonetheless, I imagine that was quite an endeavor. I don't know if there's any. I've never been able to find any history of any of the ancient history of that site. Maybe there's some mound stuff there. I don't know, but it is interesting. The one of the folks from the Abraham Lincoln conspiracy, one of John Wilkes Booth's co-conspirators, Dr. Samuel Mudd, was tried for that conspiracy and imprisoned here at Fort Jefferson Prison in the Dry Tortugas. So it's got a little bit of history in that regard there. But I, as a fan of history, I was certainly interested in going down there for that stuff. But again, like I said, there's a long pirate history down there in Key West dating back to folks like Blackbeard. And, speaking of mysteries about Robert the Doll's origins, the curse's origins, etc., folks like Blackbeard, there's a lot of mystery around characters like that. He's an infamous character in pirate lore, but and some stuff is known about the man, but he does have a history down there in Key West, and that was part of my journey down there, because allegedly one of my kinfolk, at least one of my ancestors or my ancestor's brother, so one of my kinfolk, Maynard, would also be the kinfolk of one Charles Manson. We both are Maynards from Pikeville, Kentucky, and this is of that same Maynard family tree. But one of those Maynard boys out of the Virginia militia, they're credited with, in some of the tales at least, credited with murdering here, with taking out the warrant for the arrest and or murder, and I believe they just scratched out arrest and murdered him, of Blackbeard. He was had a bounty or so on his head from the king of England. So they take him out, and that's down there in I believe that's down the Bahamas, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a lot of travel between the Bahamas and Key West at that time. In fact, let's see here. He dies in 1718, and they got him dying off of the shores of North Carolina there. Like I said, it was which would have been Virginia at the time. So like I said, it was the Virginia militia. North Carolina wasn't a thing yet, so that was still Virginia. But it was that Virginia militia. And let's just look here while we're on the page, see what the Wikipedia, the source of all information on the interwebs, let's see what they have to say about the death of Edward Teach, aka Blackbeard. Oh, we got some Maynard action. I see it right there. I know there's a dispute on which Maynard it was, but it was one of them Maynard boys. Yep. Maynard found the pirates anchored on the inner side of Ocracoke Island on the evening of 21 November. Blah, 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 off with his head. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, as much as we think we know about history, and I hope any folks of the interwebs have deduced as much from listening to any of my comments about history, as much as we claim to know about history in our modern era and what is purported in modern history textbooks in school and whatnot, we don't know shit. And it's all, it's a lot of it's intentional lies, if you ask me. And, we live under a quote unquote crown history. We're obviously the crown being the British crown and the Vatican crown, right? These folks don't want us to know the actual history of America, and the folks that started it, like the Society of the Cincinnati, and again, that they play in here tonight to the conversation here on the history of Robert the Doll. So Robert Eugene Otto, the owner of Robert the Doll. Oh, before I get to that, so when I was saying with the back and forth between Key West with like Blackbeard here in the Bahamas, there was a frequent amount of travel around that time. A lot of stuff going on down there, a lot of boats back and forth, a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a couple what have yous. The folks here in tonight's tale, the Otto family and Robert Eugene Otto's wife, they both come from this heritage, right? So these are folks that, like I said, were early settlers into Key West, but Robert Eugene Otto's wife, that is, her family comes in from the Bahamas. She's got some lengthy history in the Bahamas. In fact, one of the tales of Robert the Doll's curse revolves the servants, the slaves there, if you will, of, I guess technically they were servants, not slaves, but, indentured servitude of some regard, right? Was I believe the man was black, but the woman was of mixed heritage from the Bahamas, which is important to note because much like Kamala Harris, there was a lot of early white colonial settlers in the Bahamas. So right around the same time the Puritans are hitting, Massachusetts Bay, we got the same kind of influx of puritanical, Christianity business going on. For European folks going into the Bahamas, and specifically places like Jamaica, where you find like old Kamala's the Browns and the Hamiltons. A lot of Scots-Irish history in that lady's heritage, to be calling herself anything else. But it is those folks that it seems like those early colonial settlers of the Bahamas like that. That is where Robert Eugene Otto's wife hails from, some of that heritage. In fact, much like the servant. So I don't know the mixed heritage of some of the servant business going on here, but nonetheless, it is these ideas of this curse of Robert the Doll, that it's some sort of voodoo or hoodoo curse that was instilled upon the doll, largely credited with the servant. So one of the tales is the servant, I believe her name was Emmeline Abbott. She has apparently a miscarriage of some regard, or a child that dies at a young age, and that child would then haunt the doll, Robert the Doll. So that's as the story one of the legends go, at least, because it's really not certain how Robert the Doll was cursed, or where this curse began. But that's one of them. But again, I would almost ascertain there's a deeper history of occultism within not only the Otto family, but the Parker family. So Robert Eugene Otto marries. I'll get into that one more second before I close out my interest in Key West. We'll go on to the Otto Parker situation. So, like I said, the pirate situations, the Blackbeard was an example of how some of these families, like the Parkers and their servants, would immigrate from the Bahamas into Key West. And Blackbeard was commonly on a similar route of travel. And like I said, he did some Key West business, and he would be known from the Bahamas business. And, there's something to be said about whatever was going on with a lot of these folks, because there's a lot of early onset to the Society of Cincinnati activity, not the least of which is George Washington down there in the quote unquote West Indies. Not long after this time in which Blackbeard is murdered. In fact, he's living down there a couple years. Alexander Hamilton, the second president general of the society after Washington, he comes from, I believe they claim, Barbados, but nonetheless, he's of this early he's in mixed heritage as well with the native population, and I believe Barbados is what is claimed. Nonetheless, down there in the West Indies region, further south than the Bahamas, but not far off. But nonetheless, Hamilton, obviously being a Scottish surname, he's from some Scottish heritage. Like I'm saying, a lot of these early colonial folks, that's the heritage we're finding here amongst the Ottos and the Parkers, Robert Eugene Otto's wife. But one of my other interests there was getting down to Key West to see some of the sites, and I just think some of the other interest of what goes on in Key West past this pirate atmosphere. You got the Ernest Hemingway famously found his way into finding it as his residence. That's his house. I stopped by there. I got creeped out by the weird cats they have there. They got these weird cats, these polydactyl cats. I'm out of here. They got too many things on their paws, too many claws. They got an extra claw. See, they look weird. I don't like cats to begin with, so I was done with that. And then they got the Harry S. Truman little White House. So this was his kind of Camp David situation, right before Camp David. Harry S. Truman's getaway was Key West. So I find that intriguing because it seems like Key West has played an important role since the days of Blackbeard, since the days of the Spaniards running that joint, then the British, and then then the Americans were building big forts to fight folks off, like on mound sites. I mean, I just think there's a lot to be said about this history there. The families that are involved in it, again, the Parkers and the Ottos go way back there. They're not, early, they were early settlers in these regions, so long before Harry Truman was setting up his White House down there. But those interests, or those aspects that have interested me. And then again, my early mound journeys I suppose that I probably began somewhere around being a Mormon as a child, all their mound stuff with the Hill Cumorah, the mound in which spawned the quote unquote golden tablets of Joseph Smith that he allegedly translated in some sort of magical rituals into the Book of Mormon. But a lot of mound stuff with the Mormons, a lot of mound stuff with the Society of Cincinnati, and I kind of had my own little mound journey that found my way into intersecting those two different things. But it was that mound journey also that had me looking at mound sites down there. And here's a quick blurb about some of that stuff. I couldn't find the original the original survey completed on that site, but I believe it was this one referenced here. Key West is this survey is given by Benjamin B. Strobel and was published in the Charleston Courier, May 12th, 1837. And it goes on to describe the former residence of Indians on this island is proved by the existence of a number of mounds supposed to have been burial places. One of those was opened and examined in the year 1823. It contained a number of human skeletons, gold and silver ornaments, domestic utensils, arrowheads, pipes, immense quantities of human bone found on every part of the island. So I don't recall it was the 1823 survey, but it was one of those surveys, those early surveys. This is the same time the Otto family is showing up in Key West as well, by the way. The Parkers shortly thereafter from the Bahamas. But nonetheless, this is a time when these folks are exploring these mounds, and one of the groups that's associated with the founders of this nation, America here, that the Society of Cincinnati, being the founding fathers included. Many of the founding fathers were in the Society of Cincinnati, but not all of the founding fathers. And just like not every U.S. president was a Freemason, but many U.S. presidents were Freemasons and many founding fathers were Freemasons. But all U.S. presidents are members of the Society of Cincinnati. So it's this weird intersection of groups, but it is an interest, obviously, within Freemasonry that I've seen over the years, especially in the early onset of colonialism after the wars of 1776. You can look at the founding of towns across Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. You can see all these folks not only building these towns on mound sites, many county buildings. The county building is being built on a mound site in a ritual ceremony, oftentimes including the earthenworks of that mound as a cornerstone in the county building. One county that comes to example is Boone County, Illinois. So, and that's named after a society member, Daniel Boone, famous member. Again, all roads lead back to the society. Everyone knows Daniel Boone's name, but they just don't know he was a very important member in this group, the secret society that started America. And I suspect that element has been obfuscated from those narratives and folklore intentionally, but nonetheless, there's a site in Boone County, Illinois. There was a ritual, or whatever you want to call it, ritual, I would call it, ceremony of some sorts, a groundbreaking ceremony or a ritual in which to disassemble that mound, use the contents as the cornerstone of the new, very Masonic looking kind of, county building, the county headquarters or whatever there. So, and it is, you can see these kind of things. And then when you look at the folks like the Ottos, and I point out these surveys of these mounds, and the mound site that existed at the site of the Fort East Martello Civil War fort, and now a museum that houses Robert the Doll, the mound site that sat there. That's the times these things are being, those, early to mid 1800s. When these surveys are being conducted, 1820s, 1830s, and this is the time the Ottos show up in town too. I think that's interesting because if you look at who the Ottos are, back to who these families are, where these things come from, and if that curse is as a result of the servant, and maybe the servant was a hoodoo practitioner, or maybe these families are into some occultism, because again, not only the mounds and the Freemasonry, as we're going to see, the Parker family, that's a Society of Cincinnati family. So we're back to this mound occultism right there. And on top of that, they come from the Bahamas. So if they have servants doing hoodoo that they bring with them from the Bahamas to the Key West, I'm going to go ahead and say it's my belief that family is doing hoodoo or voodoo or whatever sort of island mysticism, occultism that they're doing. So I'm not willing to necessarily just be like, oh, well, it's the servant's fault. Because, when you're dealing with these Freemasonry families like the Ottos, you're dealing with the Parker family, Society of Cincinnati family, and I'll get into that here in a minute in more detail, meaning Robert Eugene Otto's wife, her father appears to have been a member of the Society of Cincinnati. Not just any member, descendant from a major an important Navy admiral in the wars of 1776. So again, it's those officers of that war that comprise the original membership. So I would say, based upon, it's my assertion, based upon the ranks of the original members, oftentimes impacts the weight of their power within that organization. For example, the descendant of a general, the general is going to have more power in that organization than a lieutenant, even after the war, just politically and socio-politically speaking. Well, today, that descendant of that general is likely going to have more power within that organization than the descendant of that lieutenant, of that young lieutenant. So that's all I'm saying. So Robert Eugene Otto's wife, or his father-in-law, most probably a member of the Society of Cincinnati from this admiral. We'll get to that in a second. But again, it's this epicenter of this kind of Society of Cincinnati business, this old Freemasonry of the time, settling in this Key West area at the time, where they're digging into these mounds. And again, Freemasonry across America is doing the same thing around the same time, right? The 1820s, 1830s. They're setting up shop on mounds in Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and so on and so forth. Again, so I'm not willing to say like, well, there's probably a lot more occultism going on in these families outside just this servant that they want to pin it all on. But seems like the Lee Harvey Oswald, the situation, if you ask me. And speaking of Lee Harvey Oswald, probably a member of the Society of Cincinnati. His second great grandfather, a major out of the Georgia chapter of the Society. The 13 chapters, one chapter for each of the 13 colonies, and then the French chapter, right? So all roads lead back to the Society, if you ask me. But speaking of these mounds as well, in the Civil War, that is just one more example. The part of my heritage is being a Scots Irish Cherokee fella. The Cherokee, kind of their origin story, right? Their the story, the folklore of the birth of the Cherokee people originates here around this mound, the Niquosi Mound in Franklin, North Carolina, just south of Cherokee, North Carolina, which is a large part, or especially my clan Vance, numerous branches of my tree go back to the same area. So this is, before West Virginia's and Vermont's, this is my my heritage is down in this specific region. And they, again, it goes around a mound, and these mounds, especially in that territory, the Cherokees even, they were used during the Civil War for forts and other things built on top of them, right? So not only just the East Martello Fort in Key West built on top of a mound, and many other forts. They use this one in Cherokee's territory. This used to be a platform mound at the center of a Cherokee village. And Cherokees didn't live in teepees and huts. They had hardened structures. I could see what, if you look at the Scots Irish and their backgrounds and their immigration in America, you can see why they settled in well with the Cherokee, because they both had similar lifestyles in the mountains and the way they lived and the structures in which they built. So I often wonder how far back these histories go with these folks when they're doing such similar things, in the late 1600s, early 1700s, if you will, when they first start, kind of intermingling, at least in my family trees. So and it's not just, you can look at this and be like, well, that's a, maybe they had to build the fort in Key West because that was the best spot near the water, and that was where the mound was, right? You can make these arguments. You can make this argument here that this stockade that they built here on top of this mound was built for some reason so folks could see it. But I don't know that you want to flag off where you're keeping all your supplies. This is a supply depot, so I don't know you want to necessarily like alert everyone to put your supply depot on a very visible high point. You may want to put stuff on there on a supply depot because that's important, and you're guarding the important land underneath it. So you're not going to lose your supply depot. It's going to be away from enemy lines, and you're going to put it in an important spot geographically speaking. I'm just saying, I think they were protecting the mound more than they were doing anything else. And I make that point to make this point before we go back into the Ottos and the Parkers, and still talking mounds in the Society of Cincinnati. And that is Jefferson Davis, the other first president in America, right? He was a captain in the War of 1812, and he actually marries his father-in-law was also a member of the Society of Cincinnati, who his wife was named after the man who apparently got General Washington to start the society, and that was General Henry Knox. So, when Jefferson Davis is an officer in the Army, likely I don't have his membership card, likely qualifying himself. So it seems to be that anything from the wars of 1776 through 1812 as an officer qualified folks into membership of this, according to some chapters. That matter may be disputed, but nonetheless, it seems like he got membership. And then again, because his father-in-law was a member, and then that man named that dude's daughter after the founder of the organization. Again, a female. So why are you naming a woman after a man? So I just think there's a strong argument to be made. But nonetheless, he during the War of 1812. He was the captain in charge of a fort that he established on the Effigy Mounds, what is now known today as the Effigy Mounds National Monument in Iowa on the Mississippi River. So this is not a matter of building things and destroying things. This is a matter of protecting the site. Everything that from everything I can ascertain by looking at the activities surrounding Davis's U.S. Army leadership at a site that he established out there as a fort. It seemed to be the fort was established to protect this site, right? Not to destroy the effigy mounds. So back to the Society of Cincinnati, a deeper occult and esoteric nature and history of America, and these specific mound sites like the mound site Robert the Doll sits on. Well, there's a lot to be said, I think. Again, not the servants, but a lot to be said about these families. And back to the Otto family before we get into the Society Cincinnati Parker family. Again, Robert Eugene Otto, given Robert the Doll, namesake for Robert Eugene here, or AKA Gene, born in 1900, dies in 1974. Born in Key West, dies in Key West. In between there, he didn't live in Key West most of his life. He also didn't live with Gene most of his life. So, my apologies. He didn't live with Robert most of his life. Gene, that is. So, he goes to college at the age of 18. He attends school. He goes to a couple different schools. He becomes an artist. In fact, it's an interesting story, him and his wife, as far as their careers go. But he ends up marrying Annette Parker in 1930 in Paris. So he ends up going to art school, various art schools. He meets her in Paris. She's an actress of a very notable nature at that time, especially. She's doing performances for the King of England. She's winning awards. She's doing stuff like that. So they live over there. They're doing that stuff in London. I think they largely live out of, I'll go over their life story in a minute, but it is interesting. So Robert Eugene Otto, he gets given Robert the Doll at the age of 1904, from his grandfather, Dr. Joseph Otto. Again, also, that man was also born in Key West, again, old family. And then at the age of 18, he goes to school. So from 18 to age, I believe it's 68 or 69 there, and he dies at the age of 73. Old Gene here was away from Robert the Doll, but apparently during those 14 or so years that they grew up together, it was a thing, I guess. We'll go, and I'll get it back into that legend in a minute here, but when we get through these families, but apparently he got blamed for, old Gene here would blame Robert for a lot of misdeeds, but he would later reconnect with Robert the last few years of his life, and that's when things got even weirder, it seems. So, it is an interesting story, though, with when you look at the families involved, right? So here on this find a grave, it says, according to legend, he was given a doll by his Jamaican nurse that was made in his likeness. So again, there's a lot of these things that surround it. I don't think that's an accurate tale. There seems to be, again, made by the lady that invented the teddy bear. And she'll be the last person we go over here on the backstory of these characters, right? So you got Robert Eugene Otto. His grandfather is Dr. Joseph Otto, again, born in Key West in 1826, dies in 1885, right? But I think what's notable here, he was a notable person down there, again, a doctor. And I think it's important to note, you'll see on his gravestone, when I say they're built digging into the mounds, the Freemasons are, putting lodges on mounds across America. Well, look what old Dr. Joseph Otto here, born 1826 there in Key West and dies in 1885. Look what's on his gravestone there. None other than the Freemasonry symbol. So when I'm talking about these mounds and the occultism, that's precisely what I'm talking about. And then you see that with the Otto family, and then you see that with the Parker family. Again, well, this is interesting. So that right nearby that gravestone, you'll see of Dr. Joseph Otto, and that's an odd cemetery. That cemetery's got a lot. Back to the weird nature of Key West, right? So Key West, the pirate aspects of it, the pirate atmosphere. Again, I enjoy these kind of libertarian aspects. I'm not libertarian. I enjoy the liberty aspects of it. Libertarians are mouth breathers for the most part. I've never met one that I've found to actually really represent liberty, so it's more of a title, I feel like, for most folks. But I do enjoy that aspect of the atmosphere and environment in Key West, but nonetheless, there you find liberties, it goes a long way. It's a wide scope of liberty for a lot of folks, and that's what liberty is. You not really, unless you're committing some crimes, then it's tough to say that you're encroaching on someone else's liberty. Other than that, and then again, there's even obviously arguments to be made here about even how that works. But nonetheless, it's still weird when you find a gravestone here of a woman who's bound. So this gravestone here, right by Dr. Joseph Otto, and amongst the many other oddities in this cemetery here in Key West, she's handcuffed or tied behind her back. So in a crouched position. So it's kind of odd. Again, when you have such a free will environment, if you will, you're going to find some odd things, but that's a little bit strange if you ask me. It gets a little dark, and that's what I mean when you're talking about occultism, these mounds and these families down there, and where some curses might come from. Well, like I said, these families I would look closer at myself. So then you have Captain Timothy Parker, Revolutionary War hero. So if you want to attribute Robert the Doll to be the child of the childless marriage of Robert Eugene Otto and Annette Parker Otto, well, if you wanted to attribute Robert being their child, well, this would be Robert's third great-grandfather. I'm not saying Robert was a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. That's preposterous. But I'm saying Annette's father was, it seems. So looking at the descendants of Captain Timothy Parker, Revolutionary War naval captain, commanding a ship there in the brand new American Navy, birthed out of Whitehall, New York, in the wars of 1776. He, looking at his descendants, he didn't have, it's pretty easy when there's not a lot of sons, right? So there's only one son every time you go down to the generations, and then you hit Annette Parker, Otto's father, and he's the eldest of those couple sons. He's got some brothers, so it does appear that that's an interesting comment. Look up Luke Thep dolls. They use dead fetus. That's extremely creepy. I will look that up. Thank you. Thank you, Melinda Johnson. I'm creeped out even picturing that in my brain hole here. But it is weird shit like that goes on in this world. So who knows what some of these people do? But I will certainly be looking that up. But you look at the descendants here, and it seems it's in all likely probabilities Annette Parker Otto's father was a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. So descended again from his great grandfather, Captain Timothy Parker, Revolutionary War hero. Again, major figure in the war, especially in the brand new Navy. It was brand new Army too, I suppose, but nonetheless, major figure, I would argue. So, and it is these families again that I think are steeped in this, various occultism. Again, the Mormons are essentially an offshoot of the Society of the Cincinnati. Joseph Smith's grandfather was a captain in the Massachusetts militia in the wars of 1776. And then he's named, so then his father, looking at their descendants, it seems like his father would then become the member, and then that's Joseph Smith Sr. So looking at that, then very likely with the namesake Joseph Smith Jr. then would be the next hereditary member. And Joseph Smith Jr. forms Mormonism on a mound in Fayette, New York. Fayette, New York was named after General Marquis de Lafayette, the head of the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. And again, he finds the scriptures of his new religion in a mound. And the philosophies of Mormonism includes these native wars and Jesus, coming to America. But it's these native wars that surrounded these kind of history of these mounds, and the ideas in which Joseph would perpetrate in that regard really come from a founding father who published a book. That's they call it 1830 when Joseph did that. I would dispute that, but it might have been earlier. But in 1816, founding father and a member of the Society of Cincinnati, a fellow by the name of Elias Boudinot, wrote a book about these lost tribes that came to America, that fought these wars and built these mounds. And that is where I believe Joseph Smith got it. And again, he seemed to have been a member of the society, hereditary, and seemed to have basically incorporated those ideas into his quote unquote new religion. Right. So there's a lot to be said about the deep occultism around these society families, the mounds, and the Freemason lodges that were built on top of them, and these war sites as well, obviously. But it's the Ottos that were down there in Key West at the same time those mound sites around the East Martello Museum, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, how far back does this Otto relationship go with maybe even that mound site, right? Were there Freemasons involved in some of the surveys and, excavations of that mound site where Robert the Doll sits today? Is that why Robert the Doll was moved from the family's home into that mound site? Because that family has deep associations with that mound site. I question all these things because these bastards cursed me with all this, and I didn't see it coming. Never saw it coming. And it's good to question things anyway. But so we see the Society of Cincinnati, we see the Freemasons, right? Again, at a time when I would argue that, I have looked. I mean, there's not a great amount of records of personnel that were involved in these surveys and excavations. That's what I'm saying. Like, in my mind, the Ottos were involved in these activities, and there is a nature connecting principle of some regard that connects Robert the Doll and the Otto family from their home that he sat in for decades. Even when Robert Eugene, old Gene there, was traveling the world doing acting and singing and meeting kings and whatever else here, he's sitting at old Robert the Doll sitting in an attic at the family home until Gene goes back there, right? And then he dies, and then shortly there, not long after that, there was another party that was involved. And we'll go through the lineage of where Robert ended up at here, but nonetheless, for the most part, it sat in the Otto's home, and then it sat in a site that I would argue the Ottos have heritage in that site and the activities surrounding that mound site. And who knows, maybe even the fort. They needed a doctor, didn't they? This dude was the doctor down there, right? I mean, how many, I don't know if he was the only doctor. From my estimations, that I couldn't find any other records of doctors. So at that time, especially when that fort's being built. So for all I know, the Ottos have a deeper history, not only that mound site being excavated, the fort and the activities around that fort. And Lord knows why else they built a fort there and what else is involved here. But what I'm saying is this curse of Robert the Doll may be an amalgamation of a lot of different occult things. When you start blowing up these occult soups like they do with Thelema, when they start mashing together Hindus and Buddhism stuff and Christianity stuff and other deeper occult practices that we would describe as Satanism today, through these Crowley Thelema practices, when they start mixing all that stuff up, and then you're throwing in some society occultism because they got some old school goddess worship going on there big time. I mean, the Statue of Liberty, that's an amalgamation of multiple goddesses that they've kind of mashed together, it seems like, into this figure they call Columbia. So we're talking about some deep occultism stuff. So that's what I'm saying. You start mixing a bunch of stuff together, maybe that soup or stew doesn't turn out right. Maybe the recipe's gone wrong because you just mashed too much shit together, and the result of which you get a fucking cursed doll, dude. I don't know. I'm throwing out some ideas there because while it certainly could be some hoodoo voodoo stuff, I'm not willing to say these people haven't incorporated that stuff into their lifestyles, right? It certainly seems like they have. And it's not without precedent, because you look at some of the early onset of even some of these society families into Louisiana, surrounding the early onset of New Orleans. They're the ones responsible for it. We helped them with the American Society side, folks like President Andrew Jackson, who's notorious for being a general down there in the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812. Well, you look at a lot of the early onset of occultism down there, and it's a lot of society stuff. In fact, I would argue occultism in America, not just Mormonism, not just Freemasonry, Mound, Civil War stuff here. Occultism in America goes back to the Society of the Cincinnati Families and predates them, obviously, because it predates the society. But you look at Joseph Smith's family, they're involved in the Salem witch trials. You look at Marvel Jack Parsons, Aleister Crowley's #1 Thelemite in America, when we're talking about all this kind of Satanism, Thelema stuff that gets mashed in together with these occult families and theologies over the years. Over the years, I think that gets incorporated, right? You get Jack Parsons. Well, he appears to have been a member of the Society of the Cincinnati via his third great-grandfather, who appears to have been a colonel in the Massachusetts chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati. So, and he's responsible for how much occultism in America, offshoots of and disciple of Crowley. He spawns essentially Scientology, right? From the Agape Lodge of the OTO with L. Ron Hubbard as his associate in there. And then you look at all the Thelema offshoots. You got, Church of Satan, Satanic Temple, all these kind of things. They all go back to Crowleyism and Thelemas. You got the process as an offshoot of Scientology. There's a lot of influence that comes from one Marvel Jack Parsons. Again, I don't have a membership card. I will be going over these things here in a future Operation GCD Sundays that I've already written here. I haven't scheduled it yet, but it'll be on the schedule. It's the Occult Genealogy of America, where I go deeper into the Joseph Smith stuff, the Marvel Jack Parsons stuff, and other characters. Is the Process Church here in America has early membership and original membership of Society of Cincinnati Families, who's at least one of them, the founding member, her father was a member of the society. So we have that. And then you look at folks like Jack Parsons again, and this idea that all of this occultism comes from the society in America. Well, his grandmother, his fourth great grandmother, I believe it was, fourth great grandmother Parsons, right? The mother of that officer, I believe it was, or grandmother of that officer, one of the two, I think it was grandmother. So we'll call it fifth great grandmother Parsons. She was accused of being a witch at those same Salem witch trials in which Joseph Smith's forefather, or I think was his great grandfather, was involved in, accusing folks of, right? So, it's strange to find these folks perpetrating some of the largest occult groups in America here in the subsequent centuries after that event there in Salem, Massachusetts. So, and it is that early onset of the kind of, in at least in the Louisiana region, these society families, like I'm inferring out of the Key West region, that came in there and settled there, a lot of them French, they incorporated it seems like they incorporated a lot of these kind of hoodoo or voodoo practices into their occult belief systems and practices. So in a, Aleister Crowley almost style Thelemic stew, right? Because that's all he did was mash together older principles and practices and called it Thelema. Well, I think that's what a lot of these, I'm not saying Crowley's a member of the society. Well, there are a number of British members, including members that have served in Parliament. In fact, the King of Sweden, I believe, is currently a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. So again, back to these European Russian Otto family, right? They didn't, that Freemasonry didn't start in Key West. They may have came with them from the old world, but I'm saying the occultism came with them from the old world, just manifested in that Dr. Joseph Otto in Key West, right, as a ranking Freemason apparently. But it is these families that do mash these things together. And again, it is exhibited in Louisiana with society families and what they incorporated with the local practices that they encountered. So if the Parker family, the descendants of Admiral Parker of the Society of Cincinnati, if they encountered hoodoo and voodoo stuff when they moved to the Bahamas, well, then perhaps they incorporated the hoodoo voodoo practices they encountered into their occultism within their family. And that's why the servants they were cool with the servants doing that stuff in their house, which is apparently how the legend goes. So further on the Robert the Doll tale, and not to get too far distracted in Society of Cincinnati, I just wanted to build a stronger narrative on this occultism and where this curse may come from. And maybe consider, I'm not a member of the society, but nor do I have any direct lineage in my paternal lineage. Abner Vance was an enlisted, much like myself. Abner Vance was an enlisted man. He allegedly, his legend goes, speaking of legends, his legend goes, he was Abner's my fourth, double fifth, and my sixth great grandfather, because I don't have a lot of trees. It's more of an Appalachian family pole, if you will, instead of a family tree. I don't have a lot of branches. So, but Abner was an enlisted man who allegedly served as legend has it, as a spy and a scout for General Washington. And a lot to be said to that tale, because Abner's father, Matthew, at least his father on paper, because I got questions about that. His father on paper grew up with George in Frederick, Virginia. And Matthew married Martha's first cousin. So they clearly have a longer history together. Abner's folks, that is, and the Washingtons, amongst other kinfolk relations I have with both parties. I'm saying Abner himself, his father grew up with George and married Martha Washington's first cousin, 2 years before George and Martha were married. So these folks knew each other, is what I'm saying. And but that doesn't qualify. So I do put validity to Abner serving as a spy and a scout for Washington in the wars of 1776. What it doesn't qualify him for is membership in the society, because he was a 17-year-old enlisted man in April of 1777 when he enlisted, took the oath of allegiance in Chatham, Virginia. So, but Marguerite, nonetheless, I have a lot of family kinfolk in that I would call. None of them are open about it. It's not a conversation I have with them. But looking at family trees, after I discovered the Society of Cincinnati and whatnot, looking at family trees, I have a number of kinfolk that are members of the society, and because these families all intertwine over the years. I mean, for example, one of the many examples besides the Washingtons and the Dandridges and whatnot there, it's actually the Joneses, not the Dandridges. Martha Dandridge Washington's mother was a Jones. Her brother is my forefather, and their father was the priests or the man of the cloth. I'm horrible with these terms. The man of the cloth of Bruton Parish Church in Williamsburg, Virginia, which served as the site of the Virginia founding fathers' site of planning the Revolution. So a lot of deep American history here. But nonetheless, what my point is, these families intertwine and intermarry over the years. Got a lot of kinfolk in that regions. Those memberships, that is, none that I know of specifically or can prove, but looking at, again, family trees. So in this idea of this cultism amongst the society, again, the Parkers, Robert Eugene Otto's wife and her family and whatnot, I often wonder if there's something in DNA that attracts these things. Because, I mean, while I'm not the only one cursed, I feel like that curse got me real good. But Robert the Doll was allegedly built as a unique doll and given to Gene Otto in 1904, but it was allegedly built by this lady, Marguerite Steiff, who was the seamstress and founder of the Steiff Stuffed Animal Corporation there in Germany, and inventor of the teddy bear, right? What would be nicknamed the teddy bear. So this is, and that's 1902. The company began making a toy bear with movable joints based upon a design by her nephew. Taking off to the United States, it was nicknamed after then U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt. So she dies in 1909. It's alleged that she handmade the Robert the Doll, and it's certainly possible she was alive, and she was the founder and seamstress of that operation. But so the Ottos are from Prussia. This is Germany. I don't know. So allegedly, Dr. Joseph Otto goes back to the old world and buys Robert the Doll and gives him to his grandson Gene. So I don't know if there's any deeper sort of occultism there, or some sort of I'm not going to call Robert the Doll voodoo doll, because that's obviously voodoo, but I'm not sure there's any sort of Germanic occult folklore to this whole invention of the teddy bear, right, or this doll. So dolls weren't a thing in 1904. So when Gene got Robert the doll, these were not popularized things yet in America, right? So this was something his grandfather brought back and was a brand new thing. It wasn't like, oh, I've always wanted a teddy bear. Like this wasn't a thing. So I've always wondered kind of that there was like maybe like a demonic background to the teddy bear. Like there's a demonic background to Mickey the Mouse, right? That kind of thing, which also spawns from Germanic folklore, if you will. In fact, while I mentioned that, just on a quick note, there was my assertion that Mickey the Mouse is actually a depiction of a demon thing that was found in a mound, Germanic mound from Viking time frames, I believe circa 900, 950, we'll call it. Show the end of the end of the Viking time frame, right? But nonetheless, they found this little demonic thing in the mound there, and they claim that historians or modern day folk, right? They claim that Madoobie fell apart. That's no good. You're bullshitting too much. They claim that's a lion. Well, first of all, lions don't live up there in Germany. They're not known to, at least. And I would assert that's, as found, like we read in the Key West article about the stuff they found in that mound. It's usually ceremonial ritual things found on these mounds. And if you look at the family trees of the folks in the Society of Cincinnati, you go back to the Templars, you go from there to the Normans, the Norman invasion of the UK in 1066. And the Normans were the combination of the Christianized Vikings intermarrying with the local Norse population there, Norman population, of Normandy, France. So that's where we get the Normans. So if we were to follow that lineage back of these mound groups and this mound bloodlines and cultures, we go back to the Viking era where they find this son of a bitch who looks a lot like Mickey Mouse. And I would claim Mickey Mouse, given the fact that Mickey Mouse, I believe, is a member of I think they inducted him into the De Molay Society, which is one of these Freemasonic organizations, right? So, there's a lot of Freemasonic kind of natures to Mickey Mouse to begin with, but I would argue that this is actually a depiction of whatever this little demon creature was that was a ritualistic trinket that was buried in a Viking era mound there in the Germanic tribes. So I wonder, on those same lines, with the invention of the teddy bear of this, back into this Germany's era situation, right? I wonder if that invention and then was some sort of, has some sort of deeper occult folklore, and thereby when they're making a unique, that same lady who invents the teddy bear is making a unique doll, is there already an occult purpose to Robert from the onset, is what I'm getting at. It's the old argument of the chicken or the egg, or as I like to say, Bill Clinton and the blue dress, which one came first, right? So if Robert is cursed, is he already a vessel in which to already accept some sort of spirit, is what I'm getting at. I think it's a good question to ask. We seem to like to, when I say the modern era of society with these occult belief systems, seem to like to bring back the demons from the past, if you will, including this little demonic mouse-looking creature they found, claimed to be a lion, found in a Viking era mound in the Germanic areas, not far from where the Ottos come from, and not far from where Homegirl invented the teddy bear, right? Marguerite Steiff. The alleged seamstress and manufacturer of Robert the Doll is certainly a product. It's been proven to be a product of their corporation. She was alive, and it is alleged that she was the person that made Robert. So whether or not that's true, I don't know that anyone will know, but it's certainly intriguing, I would say, right? I mean, there's a circumstantial argument, at least, to be made that that is the case here. And again, if there's even if there's not a deeper occult thing to the teddy bear, but I would argue if there was, which it seems like, it's good evidence that this Steiff teddy bear manufacturing operation has got some, deeper occult business to it. And again, if that's the case, then again, is Robert the Doll already a unique, handmade vessel in which to, call a spirit into, if you will, right? So what I'm saying is, was there a spirit intentionally through some sort of ritual practice or ritual ceremony? Did they call a spirit into Robert the Doll? Was he made for that purpose to begin with? And if he was, I mean, you might be thinking, well, that's sick. Why would Dr. Joseph Otto give that to his grandson? Well, look, why is the grass green? I don't know. I'm just saying these occult families do a lot of strange shit, So, if we're going to look at the strange shit of uniquely Gene and his wife, Annette Parker Otto, whose father was a member, it seems, of the Society of the Cincinnati. So to say what these occult families may do to their children, well, I'll let you folks of the interwebs fill in the blanks on that one. I couldn't tell you, but it does not seem to be good. But nonetheless, like I said, around 1918, at the age of 18 there, Gene goes off to college. Prior to that, though, it's alleged that during those between 1904 and 1918, when Gene was growing up there in Key West, prominent family, right? Was alleged. So when I say prominent family, I mean these stories probably went around town pretty quick when the town's doctor and pharmacy, because he did some pharmacy stuff too there, right? Wasn't just the doctor, he did pharmacy stuff. So, your doctor and your pharmacist starts having a haunted doll situation in his house in a very small town like this. I imagine that's going to get around pretty fast. So, and these legends still exist there today, because after encountering it, I did ask some folks there at a local restaurant. I'm like, y'all know about this? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh shit. All right. So there's a lot of stories around there, a lot of folklore amongst the townies, which I do appreciate. I like townie folklore. But it is during that time period where apparently old Robert the Doll here decided to start his shenanigans, and not the good kind, the very bad kind. He was, these mischievous acts, right? Which is kind of, you take out the murder out of the Child's Play Chucky situation, it's the same stuff, right? It's the mischievous acts, moving stuff around, causing a ruckus, that kind of thing around the Otto household. So Robert goes to school. It's like 1918. He goes off to, it was, again, here's a good blurb here on this article from Key West News, Florida Key West News, from back in October 31st, 2014, a Halloween story, Robert the Doll. I like the way they describe this here. It's a good, encapsulates pretty well of some of this legend behind him here and some of the story of Gene. It says here, if a household item turned up missing, Gene blamed Robert. When something was found broken, he did the same. In fact, whenever anything went wrong at the Otto house, Gene's standard response was, Robert did it. Did Robert do it? I have no idea. Certainly seems this creepy bastard Robert's up to no good, though. So he would go to school. It says later he would attend New York Arts Student League. So before that, it says, Gene moved away from the island to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago. He actually went to a different school before that. He attended that school at the age of, I think, 20. Let's see here. I got a different bio here real quick. Let me pull that up for old Gene here. So Gene goes to well, that's not it either. Please stand by. So here we go. So yeah, Gene went to go study architecture at the University of Virginia at the age of 18, leaving Robert back there at the family home in Key West, which apparently, according to some legends at least, old Bob the Doll here decided his antics would continue. So the family apparently just locked him away in the attic. Gene's folks, that is, right? And Gene's father passes away, I believe, in the 1960s, and his mother is ill there, and him and his wife moved back there in the late 1960s, shortly before Gene passes, right? But before that, he goes to school, leaves Robert back there in Key West, who gets locked in the attic. Gene goes to the University of Virginia for 2.5 years to study architecture. And after that, he leaves there to go study painting at the Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago for 3 more years, right? So now Jean's almost 20, almost 23, right? Robert's still back there in Key West. Then Jean goes to New York to study at a different art school for another 2.5 years. So now he's almost, he's 25, 26, almost 26. He then, after that school, goes to Paris and establishes himself as a painter, right? And that is now 1927, where he meets Annette Parker shortly thereafter. I would like to note there was a lot of Americans over there in Paris at this time. In fact, none other than Aleister Crowley and George Bush's mother-in-law, Barbara Bush's mother, Barbara Pierce Bush. Her mother was over there living in Paris in a home with Aleister Crowley. And that's a strong argument to make, circumstantially speaking, that based upon the identified sex magic rituals written about in Crowley's diary during that time, and compared to the time in which Barbara Pierce, the mother of Barbara Pierce Bush there, Pauline Pierce, the mother of Barbara Pierce Bush, Barbara Pierce Bush is the wife of George #1, mother of George #2. There's, she's living, Pauline Pierce is living there in that home in Paris around these same times as the Ottos and the Parkers are. And Pauline Pierce, again, is living there when Crowley's doing these sex magic rituals. And there's a strong argument to be made that she may have, in fact, gotten impregnated with her daughter, soon now known as Barbara Pierce Bush, right? So I'm thinking Pierce is not her last name. I think I might be getting some names mixed up there, but nonetheless, there are, looking at the history of the Ottos and the Parkers here, how they met, and kind of their heritage, right? I'm like, well, what else? What's going on over there in Paris at that time? And did these folks know each other? Sure, if you ask them, the answer of any kind of nefarious actors, whether or not they know another nefarious actor, despite provable evidence if they do or not, nefarious actors are known to say, well, we don't even know each other. It's a common trope I've seen. But Barbara Pierce was born on June 8th, 1825, but Pierce would have been her mother's married name. Her mother's maiden name was Pauline something. Let's see here. Why can I not find her? See, her mother, her father's name was Marvin Pierce. Oh, Pauline Robinson. There we go. So Pauline Robinson, Barbara Pierce Bush is born in 1925. And again, 9 months after her mother was living in a home with Aleister Crowley in Paris, right? Despite, this whole, she's married or whatever else, who knows what these folks get into other, in that regard. But what I'm saying is in 1926 and 1927, when old Jean here is setting up shop in Paris, this is at the same time. There's a lot of other kind of, if you will, upper crust Americans over there. And I often question, based upon my activities like this, what weird occultism they're into. And Crowley and Barbara Bush's mother cannot be the only, weird occultist stuff going on in Paris at that time. That's all I'm saying. Back to this, what is this Robert the Doll curse in the first place, right? So, on that note, we will go back to the tales here of Jean and Annette Parker Otto and their times there in Paris. So they marry in Paris in May 3rd, 1930. She's over there doing acting and I think playing music. So maybe not acting, but she's performing in some sort of musical, numbers type of deals. So she actually performs for King. So Annette was a brilliant pianist. There we go. So she did piano for a number of different kind of performances, varying regards. She was a brilliant pianist who once, according to David Sloan's Key West favorite ghost hunter, I'm not sure who that guy is, gave a command performance for, he guess he's the source for this. We'll have to look on that source. That may not be a good source here, Key West News. But apparently Annette Parker Otto here gave a command performance for the King of England. So, which is certainly possible. Looking at what, the circle she operated in over there in Paris, and again, the history of both of Annette and Jean here and their families, I could see that. I could see that. The couple lived in New York for a few years where Jean painted, and Annette performed at Rockefeller Center's famed Rainbow Room. So again, these folks were, they were socialites. I guess would maybe be the best way to describe them. They're of that socialite, kind of class. Maybe I guess kind of the way I picture maybe like little Great Gatsby, like maybe, right? So they continue to live in London and New York City, and then in 1969, I believe, Jean's mother becomes very ill. She's still living down there at the family home, what is now known as the Artist House. It's a bed and breakfast, I believe, in Key West today. You can rent a room here. There's their website. You can rent a room and stay there. I guess Robert used to live up here in the attic. You can see at the top. And, again, everyone in town knew this family. It's the doctor, pharmacist family and whatnot, and the son of the doctor, Joseph Otto, and whatnot. And I don't believe Thomas was a doctor, but I believe he worked in the pharmacy, if I remember records correctly. That'd be Jean's father. Nonetheless, everyone knew this family, and apparently, the times, the many decades there, that Robert was living in the attic there, and Jean was off around the world doing, upper crust, hoity-toity, bougie socialite stuff. Him and his wife Annette. Folks would apparently walk by and see Robert in the windows and stuff like that, and these tales would continue on and apparently increase in volume when Jean does come home, and I believe that's around 1969 or 1970. His mother becomes ill, and as legend goes, Annette did not want to move back back to Key West, right? Her family, her family's not from Key West. It's now that I go back here, let me take that back a notch. The Bahamanian connection there with the mixed heritage, not with his wife. That was, I want to clarify, that was with Jean's mother, Minnie Elizabeth Watkins Otto. So that early colonization of the Bahamas into Key West here was before the Civil War. They moved into Key West, but they go way back in the Bahamas. That was Jean's mother's family. Now, again, just want to clarify that in case I mixed those up before, because it was Jean's wife's family. That's the Parkers. Again, her father, descendant of a Massachusetts family of an admiral in the wars of 1776. So it is I'm way up. I have my timelines off, I guess. So they say it's 1945 he moves back there. I don't know if that's correct. Anyhow, there's a period of time where he's not there, and then old Jean and Annette move back, and he sets up again that Artist House. Again, he was an artist. He had been for many years an established artist, right? And they set up shop there in the Artist. It's now a bed and breakfast, right? You can go stay there today. And where Robert resided for many years. I'm just double checking these dates here. Yeah, I guess they did move back there around that time. Okay, I thought it was later than that. So they lived there for many decades then after that, because old Jean there doesn't pass away until 1974. So they make that their home, and it's Artist House because that's where he had his artist studio and whatnot. And I don't have any records of what she was doing during that time. I couldn't find anything. I presume she's doing some sort of performances of some regard to these, since she's such an established, musician and whatnot, pianist playing for the king, apparently at one point. Let's see. Oh, that's not it. Lose my track here. So, let's see. So they go back there. We'll call it around 1945, it seems. Then the new Jean passed in 74. So that actually means then from 1918 till about we'll call it, shortly before 45 then. And, it's a couple decades then. Robert's alone, right? We'll call it 2.5. And then, apparently living in that attic. And then there's another. Then that begins the weird adult relationship with Jean and and old Robert here. Apparently, Annette did not care for it, right? So apparently, and as the legend goes, Annette was not a fan of Gene's weird relationship with Robert, especially when they move back there as an adult, and he rekindles this strange friendship he has, right, with his old pal Robert. And we'll describe some of that here as we go through the quick bio again. The first doll, or recap here, the first doll tenders are calling here Marguerite Steiff again, manufacturer. Again, I got a lot of questions around that situation, the origin story, as we addressed. And again, the sailor suit, let's be honest, right? Annette Parker auto, right? I mean, again, apparently this goes back to Gene's childhood with the sailor suit, but then he marries, the daughter of a member of one of the major admirals in the Society of Cincinnati, right? I mean, I'm just saying, we're sold a tale on these things. I don't know how true some of these details are, right? So, I'm just saying it's odd that Robert would have the sailor suit, yet, essentially Robert's mother, if you will, the wife of Robert's owner, is the daughter of a major American admiral in the wars of 1776 and the Society of the Cincinnati. So bear with me here one moment, folks, as I roll up that doobie. So Marguerite Steiff is, I guess, technically the first owner of Robert, right? And then Dr. Joseph Otto, he goes to the old world there and purchases them and brings them back for his grandson. So you get the second doll tender, Eugene Otto, right? 1904, the doll was given to a Key West boy named Robert Eugene Otto. According to legends, the boy blamed the doll for his misdeeds, and the family reported strange activity around Robert. The two were apart for each other's lives until Gene Otto died. We're part of. That's poorly written. We're part of each other's lives until Gene Otto died in 74. Like I said, they rekindled that relationship shortly before Gene's mother passed. So I apologize for the confusion there. So that would have been 1984 or 1918 to circa just before 1945. And then circa, they were apart. So that's about 25 years. And then the next 30 years they spent together. So, and it was those 30 years that apparently, got weird. And then after he passes in 74, Myrtle Reuter was the next person to care for the doll and apparently the spirit inside of it. She believed the doll contained the spirit of a child. I believe this is around the time where this 5-year-old, as they describe, mulatto, mixed heritage Bahamian child spirit is the one that's she says, I believe, is the first to witness this spirit and claim that's the spirit haunting inside of Robert, right? And it's a very angry spirit, right? But she apparently she buys that home apparently, right? And Gene's siblings sold him the home, their rights to the home and inheritance when their mother passed, because their father had already passed. And then Gene, apparently, when he passes, his wife sells it to the home, and Robert, for that matter. Again, she was not a fan, to Myrtle Reuter here. And Myrtle Reuter lived in the home for a brief period of time, and then she sold the home, I believe, and then moves to a different home with Robert for a brief period of time before she donates Robert ultimately to the place Robert is today, when she donates to the Key West Art and Historical Society, which place they're the owners of it inside that museum, right? So, and legend has it she dies shortly after she donates it to the museum, to this historical society. So apparently a lot of stuff in around varying ownerships and hauntings of this. To the fourth guy, who's the guy they mentioned in that article before, is apparently some sort of scholar on the family here, because he's the one who said that Annette played some piano show for the King of England. This David Sloan fellow referenced in that Key West news. Says, I moved to Florida Keys in 96, dug deep into the haunted history. After hearing the story of Robert the Doll from Daryl Meyer, not sure who that is, who owned the bed and breakfast where the doll once resided. So that's the artist house. I arranged a meeting with Key West Curiosity. Yada, yada, yada. Apparently, somehow this guy got his dirty little hands on Robert. Hopefully he's haunted, because he sounds like a creepster. I'm done reading that. Nonetheless, it's gone through various ownerships. From all indications, it doesn't seem to affect the ongoing haunted nature that Robert the Doll offers everybody. Again, look at this creepy thing. I don't even like looking at it. Sometimes I wonder these one of the modern interest in things like this, be it the Annabelle doll we were discussing before, which I believe is connected to the Ed and Lorraine Warren people from the Conjuring folks and all that business. I feel like a lot of these folks probably have their own kind of occult belief systems today, like this a lot of pop, like I said, a lot of pop culture has been spawned in recent years. I was actually kind of surprised at how much coverage Robert the Doll's gotten in kind of pop culture these days, and I try not to pay any attention to it. I do my best. I've done my best to avoid all Robert, and but we can see here on the robertthedoll.org we got coast to coast stuff. Joe Rogan Experience has apparently talked about Robert the Doll. Watch out. If Joe Rogan talks about it, it's fact. And then you got your more of your standard ghost and goblin shows, right? Mysteries of the Museum, William Shatner's Weird or What, somebody named Salmon Colby with Robert the Doll. Watch out, fellas. Don't take a photograph. If you do, ask first. Travel Channel. Oh, here we go. This is what I mean. Zach Douchebaggins, the only guy. You apparently got to wear bedazzled jeans in which to go ghost hunting, according to this fella. But nonetheless, he's into all sorts of weird stuff, occultism, haunted doll stuff. He's got a museum out in Las Vegas. That's actually the site of the old Masonic Lodge, which appears. I can't prove that it's built on a mound, but I would say based upon the ongoing trend, a lot of these locations, there's some sort of occult significance to that. Las Vegas Freemasonic Lodge. It's now Zach Douchebaggins Bedazzled Hall of Fame. So a lot of stuff. I've not watched any of these things, nor will I. I don't care to. Robert the Doll has I'm not gonna say he's ruined my life, but he's sent it on a different trajectory. I do the best I can here to keep trucking. But he's just last week I tried to do this show just last week. And my dog chewed through my Starlink cable, and apparently you just can't buy things in stores. You got to ship it. It's hard to find anything on the shelves anymore in a store. So, just even talking about Robert the Doll here, I feel like the curses have just been increasing, and it could just be looking at it, could be looking too much into it. But on top of Robert the Doll seemingly manifesting his curse through my dog Abner Boy. Old Abner Boy decided to run full speed the other day and crashed right into the back of my knee, thereby taking me out and lighting my spine up like it's the fucking 4th of July. And I'm a disabled veteran, 100% disabled veteran. Got a lot of spine problems, so I didn't appreciate Robert the Doll cursing me and manifesting through Abner Boy, and for whatever reason on our walk the other day, just taking me out. I was like, "What in the world's going on here?" And it's on that note, I will transition into the this cursed nature of Robert the Doll. That's not it. So, as I said, you could see in those pictures a lot of photographs, right? Folks apologizing to Robert, saying, "Robert, I shouldn't have taken that photograph without asking you first," right? So this is robertthedoll.org. Robert the Doll has rules when you visit him. Testimonials and apologies. Be respectful and ask permission to take his photograph. Anyone who fails to follow the rules will be cursed by Robert. Below is a sample of the apology letters that Robert receives on a daily basis via mail or email. Ooh, didn't realize I could email him. I'm going to do that. I sent it the old fashioned way without any kind of confirmations. You know what I mean? So maybe that's where I erred. Maybe Robert's working in the digital age. But here's the first example here. Rookie. These people are rookies. April 22nd of 2022. Come on now. I'm dealing with August of 2013. These people are doing all. Maybe they're smarter than me. Maybe they decided they were cursed way sooner. Maybe I'm the dumb one. I don't know if my visit upset you, as it was never meant to be. Well, there we go. That's kind of how I feel. Since my visit to Key West, I have experienced some very horrible events. Well, spot on again. I just hope they are not connected in any way to my visit. But if they are, please accept my humblest apologies for anything that may have offended you during my time there. Well, there you go. That seems pretty to the point. That's a quote from this letter, I suppose. Let's see if we can see some more details here on this letter. It says, Dear Robert, I came to visit you last spring, 2021. Wow. Again, maybe I'm the dumb one. I took 13 years. These people didn't even take but a year. I was so excited to finally come to see you in person. I had no idea he existed. I came alone and there was no one else in the area of the museum that day, so I was able to talk to you quietly alone. Well, that's a pretty similar experience to what I had, sure, outside the employees. I read the letters that were framed inside your case, bad grammar, and was so impressed that you were addressed by, maybe they cursed her with bad grammar, and was so impressed that you were addressed by the President of the United States. Say what? Was this Trump or Obama? Or who was this? Biden, which is Obama number 2. I'm not sure. That's an interesting comment. I've not read this before. You sure are a popular boy. Well, now they're just kissing up. I had told you that I had traveled such a long way to see you. I didn't tell him any of these things. I said, fuck your curse. I'm taking a picture. I have the utmost respect for you. Wow. Okay. Well, my letter was not nearly as apologetic as this. I just basically just said, I'm sorry, Robert. I should not have done it. Kept it to the point. See, they're not really going over. It's just that other quote. They're not really going over what they had experienced, right? Oh, I wasn't sharing this. They're not really going over what they had experienced when I was just reading there, but, and I'll put links to this stuff here in the show notes for folks to check out later. Let's go over some more of these. I did save a couple that comparative curse stories to some of my stuff that I'll be happy to share with you folks of the interwebs here, and hopefully a cathartic nature, and one that will maybe just perhaps into this damned curse of that demonic little bastard, Robert the Doll. This person, it looks like they used hotel stationery. These are ones I have not read, but we'll scroll through some of these from the robertthedoll.org website. It says, Feeding America. It's like stationery from something. Dear Robert, I accidentally took footage of you. No, I intentionally took footage of him. I am sorry. Well, I was also sorry. I should have asked permission. I will delete the video ASAP. I hope you can forgive me. Well, that's been done. I did that already. Hopefully it worked out for Feeding America here, because I don't think it did for me, not deleting it, not writing that letter. I'm still looking for answers. Maybe some folks will have some suggestions here today. But again, I kind of feel like talking about the subject. Despite what I feel like I've gone through this week in which to accomplish this goal, I feel like talking about the subject is it's a bit cathartic in nature, and again, hopefully will perhaps help dispel the curse, and by all means, hopefully not disseminate the curse to anyone hearing this. I don't think that's ever been the case, but I also don't talk about this really that much. And when I do talk about it, it's usually in previous to today. It was usually in some sort of private party or private settings and conversations. In fact, I think I meant to play this during the preview. I'll go ahead and play it right now. But this kind of, I joke around a lot about this with my fellow folks over there at my fellow Occult Rejects, with Nick, the host of Occult Rejects, and his Occult Reject cast of characters he's accumulated, not the least of which myself here. But I like to joke around with those folks about this, because again, I've in recent months, since December of last year, I've decided, no, I gotta do something about this. You know what I mean? I'm clearly cursed, and I gotta do something about this. And again, it didn't used to be that way. Again, I brought even a little show and tell device here. This here bullet, as we used to be, my old dog chain, all ratted and crumpled up and whatnot. That's kept in my locker, because I don't wear it anymore. But I quit wearing that around 2018 when I first started considering, am I fucking cursed? Because I just wanted to get rid of anything pro or negative, just go neutral on all curses. But this here bullet, to speak to the fact that I didn't used to be cursed, May 14th of 2011, this son of a bitch should have buried itself right in the back of my brainstem. if I hadn't ducked. So I duck. I'm in Iraqistan, doing, Air Force work, and Iraqistan being the nation of Iraq on a deployment with the U.S. Air Force military police. And had I not ducked this, again, this guy, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And this little bastard that I bore a hole into, and wore it in an effort to, I don't know, at least remind myself that I'm lucky to be there. But it was after many years that I was no longer was feeling lucky, because again, that's May of 2011, or was it May? No, that would have been May of 2010. My apologies. Well, I can't even think when I deployed to Iraqistan. No, that would have been May of 20. No, it was May of 2011. I deployed in December 2010. So this has been May of 2011, and I think I left there in September. I was there a long time. Closed down the place, different story altogether. But nonetheless, at least the Air Force base that is Camp Sather, Baghdad International Airport. But it was around 2018. I was like, you know what? I think I'm fucking cursed. That bullet ain't providing me any luck anymore. That bullet that I just happened to dodge, 7 years prior to that point, like, ain't doing me shit. Robert's cursed me, So, but I have in recent months been joking about this because, again, I have decisively met a moment in time right around the time I met Robert. If you don't want to you want to do a correlation versus causation thing, right around the time I met Robert, where I suddenly found myself meeting a long, lengthy, going on 13 years series of unfortunate circumstances, not the least of which was about every 2 years after meeting Robert, where I would find paralyzing injuries, where I've had to overcome Lord knows how much to function where I am today. I continued my military service through many injuries and recovering from them, but nonetheless, I blame Robert in large part for those circumstances, because these weren't things that I had done to myself or acting dumb or acting the fool. These were just a series of very unfortunate events. And I say paralyzing injuries. I was blind for 6 months in my left eye at one point. So I'm good now. I see you just fine, but nonetheless, that Robert, he's a real son of a bitch. So I have been trying to joke around about these subjects, because there is a marketed chain of events that have occurred since I used to have some good luck back in the days when I dodged this son of a bitch, but those days have changed. And the last 13 years have been pretty wild, pretty ridiculous. As far as, basically today I sit in a wildly different position, losing much of my entire old life, family, jobs, etc. Nothing that I've done, no crimes I've committed, no misdeeds that I've done. Just a series of very, very unfortunate circumstances. And again, they continue. And when I say continue, I've known Nick over there at the Occult Rejects for about, probably closer to 3 years now. We've been collaborating on various shows and stuff, and more of the last year or so, where he's formed this Avengers style conspiracy culture esoteric team of Occult Rejects. But he again, I joke around over there, but he's known me for, again, this swath of time. And let's listen to what Headless and Nick have to say about my cursed nature of being cursed by Robert the Doll.
I thought you were going to talk about Robert the Doll. What about?
I think he was.
So
no, I think he was.
He got cursed. He got cursed by Robert the Doll.
Yeah, one of the guys on the
years.
Yeah, JJ Vance he's on the Occult Rejects, and he has his own podcast, OpGCD. Yeah, he went and took a picture of him when he wasn't supposed to.
And I bet yeah, Robert is a real cursed artifact. So
I can tell you from the 2 years I've known him personally, I think he may be cursed.
Yeah,
if you're right.
No, I did visit Robert, but I was very respectful. Even though I didn't really believe in it, I was still kind of like, part of me was just like, well, anyway, sorry, Robert, cool. Like, you're cool. Thanks for letting me be here and see you. But at that point, I definitely wasn't open yet. So, but Robert is real.
We were thinking about going down there and giving him what's for. 12 years, man. 12 years cursed.
Give him a leg drop in the parking lot.
Yeah. Show that doll his boss.
So there you go, folks. You don't have to take my word for it. There's some objective third-party witnesses for the last, now 3 years, but easily, on more of a personal friendship level, last 2 years, where Nick there has most certainly witnessed what I would describe as the curse of Robert the Doll. Not the least of which is recap a couple of those events. Unfortunate circumstances surrounding the dissolution of my 17 years of marriage that I had. Which that was a number of years back, but I'm saying that it was a tumultuous divorce proceedings that were drawn out and unnecessary. And I know that part of, I'm sure, what Nick is analyzing is some of those experiences he witnessed me go through. I mean, again, nothing, I don't like to air my dirty laundry, a lot of folks, but I'm just saying, when court, like, for example, the court in a very politically motivated action regarding matters relative to my old private detective agency, they try to throw me out of the house and stuff like that, and I'm like, fuck your orders to get out of my own house, you guys are stupid, these kind of things. And as far as working the who's getting what out of the house eventually through the court proceedings, but you're not going to throw me out of my house on day one. You know what I mean? Like, that's not happening. That's what the court tried to do, and that was one of many circumstances, I'm sure, what Nick was referencing there. And again, I got a lot of spine issues, and I got rear-ended last February, where my neck was largely immobilized for a number of weeks. I had to go through a number of therapies, that kind of thing. Again, about every 2 years, I'm due another Robert the Doll paralyzation injury, and that just happened to be that time. These things continue, and so on and so forth. But I'm saying there's an objective third-party witness to the matter, and as you heard from the guests there on Headless's Magical Mailbag there with Nick and the Occult Rejects. It's a good show, folks. Check that out. But as you heard from their guest, Deborah, who's a paranormal investigator based out of Florida, Robert the Doll's curse is real, apparently. That seems to be the ongoing opinion. And again, another opinion of someone who's perhaps studied these matters of that curse, right? So if we're looking at some other corollary, we're wrapping this thing up and bringing this show in for land here, folks, on here this volume 1 of Operation GCD Sundaze, and hope folks have enjoyed this tale thus far. Whenever you do find this tale, I hope you do enjoy it, because I enjoy telling these tales. Despite what I've gone through to tell this tale, hopefully things change in the future. I remain somewhat optimistic. Melinda Johnson, my dog, jumped on me when I was at the ocean many years ago, knocked me down, and my back went out. It was painful. I had to go to the hospital. That sounds like the kind of stuff that folks report after they encounter Robert the Doll there, Melinda. Hopefully you didn't. In fact, if folks of the interwebs, if you go to the website robertthedoll.org that I put in the show notes that I'm describing some of these letters from, I will point out they do have a section called How to Visit Robert the Doll. I will recommend you just go right past this section if you visit the website. Do not consider visiting the Robert the Doll. There's things of this universe, and if I've learned anything in the unfortunate cursed nature of Robert the Doll for the last 13 years, there's tangible elements of this universe. Well, there's elements of this universe that may not be as visibly evident and tangible as other elements of this universe. But nonetheless, they are just as impactful, if you will. Meaning you can stand in front of a bus and get hit by that bus, and that son of a bitch is going to hurt. You can also go take a picture with Robert the Doll and not ask him for it. And I tell you, that son of a bitch is going to hurt. So just to keep that in mind and consideration. So if you go to this website and you see that tab, just go ahead and keep going. You don't need to find out more. Here's a quote here, though, from a Kathy C. Again, a rookie here. Maybe I'm the rookie, because her visit was 2019, and it looks like she's writing this a month later. My husband and I visited the museum December of 2019. My husband took your picture without asking. Typical. When we were leaving the museum, as I was going through the door, I felt a shock across my shoulders. Well, that's a bit instant. In January 2020, I was diagnosed with a severe illness and have not been well since. Things keep going wrong for me. I want to say we are sorry. We took your picture without asking. Please forgive us. Well, that's a pretty standard note, I suppose. This one's more of a, they're just scratching this one on there. It's more of just a scribble on a notepad. I'll drop my doobie here. You have to stand by 1 second here, folks. In fact, let me play you a nice interlude, because I Due to my blown up spine nature right now, it's a bit of an awkward bend for me. So let me just go ahead and real quick here. I'll be right back with you.
Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right.
And we're back after those messages, folks. So on this one, it is not a long one, is it? It says, I'm sorry I was startled to see you and did not intend to disrespect you. Our lives have been upside down this year. Please forgive me for our visit, Brian K. Well, that's kind of the nature of my message when I wrote to Robert. Here we go. My name is Katie, and my fiance and I visited you at the museum in early 2022. We visited and learned about your story, and we deeply apologize if we have disrespected you in any way. Yeah, I mean, I learned about his story too. I just disregarded it. I said, caution to the wind, my friend. I'm taking a picture with this haunted dog because I don't believe in your fucking curse. Boy, was I wrong. I sincerely apologize for coming into your space without asking permission. Well, there you go. We never intended to offend you, and I'm very sorry if we have. We have been experiencing bad luck? I think they meant bad. Ever since, such as having cancer. Oh, wow, that cancer's really ruined her grammar skills. And financial issues, and wanted to apologize for any disrespect and hope that you can accept our apologies. Well, Katie, I feel your pain there, author of that letter. Yeah. That's here we go. There we go. This is a good one. This person knows where I'm coming from. About 11 years ago, I visited you and I made the worst mistake of my life. Well, Andrea H., I know what you're talking about. I thought it would, because it took me 12, right? I mean, August 2012 to December 2024. So I got you beat, Andrea H. I got you beat. About 11 years ago, I visited you and I made the worst mistake of my life. I thought it would be funny to take your picture without your permission. Well, boy, was I wrong. I had the same sentiment. So much bad has happened in my life, and I know it's because I disrespected you, and I'm so sorry I did that. I really hope you can forgive me, Robert. Me too, Andrea. Me too. P.S. I saw you on Zach Douchebaggin's show. You were great. Holy shit. All right. That's enough of that. That's literally what was written at the bottom of that right here. See? P.S. Oh, here we go. Since visiting you about 3 years ago, my house has been struck by lightning 3 times. Also, a rental home I was scheduled to vacation in caught fire the night before I was to check in. 2 nights later, the rental home we were able to stay in was struck by lightning as well. Eric D. All right. So while I can obviously describe major turning points in my life and fortunate circumstances, losing vision in my eye, getting blown up numerous times, not blown up like blown up, but blowing up numerous parts of my body all over and over again, stuff like that, recovering from these things happening again, different injuries, similar outcomes. I've had so many of those incidents, struck by lightning, things don't work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. I can't even name it. But every time those incidents happen, which again, I have a lot of those kind of deals, right? After a time, you just got to make a joke out of it, in my opinion. So that's, much like Future Tale coming up here on Operation GCD Sundaze regarding the encounter I had with a kid-diddling, cannibalistic, psychopathic, homicidal serial killer in Great Falls, Montana, back in 2001. Much like that incident where I encountered that man due to the result of my own ridiculous and stupid activities of driving while extremely intoxicated. I went right back to work. I made a joke about it. I started coming in. We would work Monday through Friday. I was doing nuclear convoy security at the time, so we were doing a lot of convoys. You drive the nuclear weapons to and from base for maintenance purposes, that kind of thing. But it's a high-level security clearance, stuff like that. They don't like when you get arrested for stuff, so I was already on thin ice. So I come in there, and I start making jokes. Some folks didn't like it, but I would come in doing safety briefings on Fridays for everyone had the weekend off, and I would tell everybody, don't drink and drive, don't drive and drink, don't do what I did, that kind of thing. But I would make a little bit of humor about it, and end up having to go do this all around base and giving everybody their little briefs all around base to literally every unit, But it was kind of that tap dance that avoided me getting in any serious trouble over the matter, because most folks in that circumstance not only would have lost rank, they would have been thrown out of the military. That was my 4th drinking incident in 2 years. Again, I joined the Air Force at 17, so it's probably a little bit. Put me in the middle of Montana, there's nothing else to do but drink. That's part of it too. So, and again, I wasn't mostly outside the DUI. I wasn't doing anything illegal other than the consumption of the alcohol. So, usually in my own home too, for that matter. But nonetheless, technically illegal. And the Air Force wasn't having it, but I tapped and danced, sang songs, and did a little number in front of every unit on base. Tell them, don't drive and drink, don't drink and drive, don't do what I did, and et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't get in any trouble. In fact, I got promoted 3 weeks after my DUI. So, but nonetheless, that's what got me there. And I, made a joke about that and humor. Some folks don't appreciate that, but that's the way I get by in life. If you fuck up, you got to move past it, learn from your lessons. And if you can't joke about it, then what was it good for doing in the first place? Right. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks with that whole situation. I try to joke around in the same regard. I try to joke around about Robert the Doll. Hopefully that alleviates some of the curse. Makes me feel better about it in some regard sometimes, but nonetheless, it is a dark subject, and it's not. My jokes are not to insinuate that I have not been cursed. It's not been fun, and for me, I grew up very much in weird shit. I was into super weird shit. And again, weird shit happens in and around mounds. I've been working on that theory since I was a child. And again, through 2012 and encountering Robert the Doll, that helped solidify a lot of these things to me. This weird shit theory around mounds, that is. The Air Force had a good military police specifically. They got a way of beating out the weird out of you. You know what I mean? If you will. Not, well, sometimes literally, but and I was a senior non-commissioned officer, a master sergeant, and I made so in, some claim the youngest modern Air Force. Nonetheless, it was fast. I was 10 years in, and, you got to be serious about life to get in that position. So what I'm saying is, like, they have a good way of making sure you don't even bring up weird shit, even if you think about it. So after time, it's not really a matter of conversation. Over time, I can see looking back, I progressively got the weird shit beat out of me, if you will, by me in progressively over the first 10 years of my career there. So, but, I'm certainly open to, all sorts of weird shit happening. And, again, these things have, seem to just follow me around here, much like the curse of Robert the Doll. But it is a topic that I do find to be of a nature that has not been favorable for me. Despite my jokes or not, I try to make the jokes are just me trying to make the best out of the circumstances, if you will. They don't necessarily alleviate the curse. However, they do. I giggle. I have a good time. I chuckle about it. I am going to be writing this email. I got to find that email address. I wrote an old school letter. I wrote an old school letter about, Robert, I apologize. Stop haunting me, but when I do think of those little incidents, like that last letter we read there, and I will bring us home on this point. When I do think of that incident, the little things, right? These little more mundane things, not necessarily life-changing, but shitty things to have to encounter on a daily basis, right? Like, why is this going on again in my life? It's like, you, Robert, you did it again, right? You did it again. And that's what I was thinking the other day when old Abner boy came out of nowhere and blew me up from behind, burning full blast to the back of my knee and jammed me all up, light my spine up like a Christmas tree. I'm not mad at the boy. He's a good boy, but I do look at it as I stood there, I'm like, damn you, Robert, you did it again. So that is what I consider when I go through these more, again, they're just a pain. They're just, I'm more butthurt about it than anything else, right? More butthurt. It's not life-changing. It is a nuisance. I don't really go through my day too well as a result of it, with my spine being blown up real bad. It's limiting. It's limiting on top of my other injuries already, but it's not just that. It's just, it's the idea that you can go about life and then just encounter a long series of just bullshit activity, just jamming you up like that last letter was talking about, lightning strikes and, other things, plans, reservations, everything else falling out. Right. I mean, it's just jamming you up. And I got a lot of those stories of just jamming me up. And every time those stories, those incidents happen again, I just try to make a joke out of it. And in my head, I just laugh. And picture this scene right here from the cinematic masterpiece, Another 48 Hours, back in 1990, starring the sequel to 48 Hours, starring Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte.
I have been having a very bad day. Just got out of jail this morning. Already I have been shot at. I was on the bus to just got out of jail this morning. I have been having a very bad day. Just got out of jail this morning. Already I have been shot at. I was on the bus that flipped over 17 times. A bitch tried to stab me in the bathroom. And somebody blew up my Porsche. I am in a bad goddamn mood. Now, I usually don't jump in.
So I like to picture Eddie Murphy, losing his shit there in the bar scene there, Another 48 Hours, something about his very bad day. But, at least I get a little chuckle out of the situation. Again, I got to find, when you're 13 years into a Robert the Doll curse, in fact, that was more like when I was about 4 years into or about 6 years in there to a Robert the Doll curse, circa 2018, where I was like, oh man, I really got to do something about this. So, you do what you got to do. And that's I guess that's my coping mechanism, if you will, with, these, instead of getting butthurt and angry about just whatever, dude. And just, I just laugh at myself and I'm having a very bad day. Been shot at, my car blew up, et cetera, and, guess we buy in life, I suppose. So I think we've covered the history of Robert the Doll. I think we've covered the folks involved with Robert the Doll. And I'm back. I was doing so well tonight without any interruptions. And the folks who have encountered this curse over the years and the circumstances that they've experienced in those encounters and the comparisons and similarities to some of my experiences. Again, back when I used to have good luck, very shortly before I met Robert the Doll. So, and again, that wasn't the only instance of good luck. I'm just saying this is a great example. This here bullet that I bore a hole in and wore around as a necklace on my dog tags for many years, including that day, because I was not happy about having to almost die that day. And this was just the way I was dealing with those circumstances. That's different. That's a whole different story for another time. I'm just saying that's an exhibit of the good luck I used to have shortly before I met Robert. So I'm going to send Robert another email. I might send him a clip of this here show. I'm definitely going to follow back up with him because whatever I can do to break this curse at this point in time, I'm in for it. You know what I mean? I might even have to go. No, we're not, I'm not going to progressively claim that I'm going to do. We're going to baby steps. I'm going to write the letter. Things continued. Shit has not gone well since that letter in December. And I'm not going to blame my mother's passing on Robert the Doll, but it's not the only thing that's going on. I had lost a child in a miscarriage last year. I could blame that on Robert the Doll. In fact, I'm willing to do so. I'm just saying that is the bad luck. Some more of the natures of these bad lucks, and again, that may or may not be Robert the Doll, but just one of many, many, many circumstances that exist in my life where if I were to really explore all the things, folks, if I were to explore, if I were to go to I don't feel like I need therapy. I mean, again, the Scots Irish, we're not exactly prone to it. In fact, if I were to go see a therapist, I've had to see some for alcohol abuse and stuff in the Air Force, DUIs and whatnot. They seem to want to go find a counselor after talking to me. So I don't need to go impose anything on these people. And again, I live a relatively normal and healthy life. I enjoy my life here. My lifelong dream of living in a van down by the river, Matthew Foley style. Some folks may not find that to be a fruitful environment. I enjoy it. It's quiet. It's peaceful. I enjoy my life here as retired Master Sergeant here from the United States Air Force. And again, they can beat the weird shit out of me all they want, but sometimes I might encounter a cursed doll and that weird shit's going to find its way back into my life, apparently. But nonetheless, I do what I can to accept the circumstances, but Lord of mercy, I wish this curse would end. So we've kind of covered the full spectrum of those activities. Other folks have experienced this too. The Weird Society of Cincinnati connects us to the circumstances through Annette Parker Otto, Eugene Otto's wife, Jean Otto's wife, the owner of Robert the Doll. And apparently, somehow, I mean, she didn't apparently like it, but she lived with Robert for many years. Her father being the second great grandson of that, or great grandson of that Navy admiral, major figure in the Society of Cincinnati. The Society of Cincinnati Mound stuff. The mound stuff at the Fort East Martello Museum, where Robert the Doll sits today, where he came after he was with the Otto family for many years. That same Otto family, Dr. Joseph Otto, who's born in Key West and lives there and is a major Freemason apparently in town, being this, doctor, pharmacist, Freemason. I would imagine he's, relatively speaking, it's an important role he's playing there. And they may seemingly have connections to the site of the mound site, which was uncovered around the early, colonial, settling of Key West among families like the Ottos, who, again, with the Freemasonry stuff, I suspect there's some more deeper connections between the Ottos and that site itself where Robert the Doll sits today. So a lot of strange stuff going on there. Hoodoo, voodoo, or whatever do's. I don't know. That damn thing's haunted, if you ask me. And I don't blame it on necessarily strictly voodoo. Again, it's the mashing up of these different occult things that I think produces not a good outcome. So the recipe has gone bad in your occult stew. And then, of course, we've got, I think that's it. I think I've just recapped the entire show there, folks. And I hope folks of the interwebs have enjoyed it. And thanks for tuning in. And I don't do haunted anything. I agree with you. You shouldn't, Melinda. And you're welcome. I appreciate you joining here to listen to the story. I hope folks of the interwebs also, besides Melinda there, again, I appreciate your comments there as well, Melinda. Appreciate folks of the interwebs tuning in for the tale, and look forward to future tales here on Operation GCD Sundays and my shenanigan-infused adventures in life that have I've encountered a number of true crime and high weirdness activities, not the least of which is Buffalo Jared Revisa, the seemingly mind-controlled transpocalypse assassin who went on a multi-state killing spree and may or may not sit today in Bridgewater Mental Hospital in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, because his court filings are not public for some reason. And he's the, of the family that broke the curse of the goat. I may have to call the Revisa family to break the curse of Robert if shit keeps going south. But that'll be next week, folks of the interwebs. The legend of Buffalo Jared Revisa, the man who demanded that I hire him as my PR rep and then later murdered his PR client, a man who hired him as his PR rep. So I don't know if I was targeted for some sort of assassination. Lord, I hope not. But if I was, look at this scary son of a bitch. He's an athletic freak of nature. Don't be mistaken. Again, famous sports training, sports psychology, sports hypnotist family, and he was part of that business and a college athlete who trained within their sphere of training programs. He kind of reminds me of like a James Bond villain type of character, and especially in this photo with his midriff NASA t-shirt, his weird pants, and if you look closer, looks like a lady's thong. But this was days before that murder. This was Connecticut, and that's next week with Buffalo Jared Revisa, and I hope folks tune in for that, and that'll be a fun-filled shenanigan-infused journey here into the mind of this particular garbage can dude, and that could be part of the same curse. That's why I wanted to start off this journey here on Sundays with talking about the curse, because things that happen subsequent to the curse, I can't exactly rule out were not part of the curse. And I would not encounter Buffalo Jared until after I started considering I was cursed. And that was back in December of 2018. So when I did encounter Jared and the subsequent circumstances in those interactions, and then there's later multi-state, murder spree, I can't rule out curse. I'm just saying. Might be curse stuff. And 2 weeks from now, we got Operation GCD Live Sundays, Volume 3, The Legend of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, the kid-diddling, cannibalistic, homicidal, psychopathic serial killer that I came face-to-face with, eyeball to eyeballs, about 6 inches away, with only a slim piece of plexiglass in between. Hannibal Lecter-style Silence of the Lambs. And speaking of Buffalo Jared there, and Buffalo Bob from Silence of the Lambs, obviously being the satirical, nickname for that. Nonetheless, scary dude here, pure evil, Nathaniel Bar-Jonah. May or may not have served me human meat burgers and Hardee's on Central Avenue, circa 2000 in Great Falls, Montana. That'll be in 2 weeks. And then the detective on that case wrote the definitive book on the serial killer you've never heard of, Edward Wayne Edwards. And we'll be exploring, I'll touch on the Zodiac stuff and some of the other stuff, but we'll be exploring the life of Edward Wayne Edwards, a fascinating man who met Charles Manson in the Boys Reformatory on a mound, built on a mound in the Adena capital, the Adena Mound capital of America, Chillicothe, Ohio, and would later go on, much like Charles Manson, to be involved in the occult, various cult groups and cult practices, and very much like Charles Manson, seemingly connected to very numerous cult murders, not the least of which, in the Manson family, the Tate Polanski murders. And if that interests you, I highly recommend folks check out my Parapolitics series in the Idaho 4 and see how the Manson family murders connect directly to the Idaho murders known as the Idaho 4 murders at the University of Idaho on November 13th, 2022, when 4 young college students were murdered in the middle of the night in their off-campus home. That case has direct connections to the Manson family, not the least of which is just the simple implication that that is a murder that is strikingly similar to that Tate Polanski murder I was just describing, of the man that is attributed to the Manson families. That is only one of the connections. So it's an ongoing series I'm doing on Operation GCD Live Wednesdays, unpacking some of those parapolitics connected to that ongoing murder case, which is highly restricted from public purview and largely sealed, which is, to quote the one of the victims' fathers in that case, gag orders, meaning the court's sealing of all this stuff, gag orders are for matters of national security. But I don't think the matter of national security, I don't think is far off in the reasons why we don't know much about Edward Wayne Edwards today. But the detective on that cannibalistic, kid-diddling serial killer, psychopathic, homicidal maniac that I came face to face with in Great Falls, Montana, well, the man that brought him down, Detective John Cameron, is the man that wrote this book on Edward Wayne Edwards, and I think he makes some valid arguments. And we'll be doing that in 3 weeks. So, folks of the interwebs, Melinda Johnson, thanks for those comments. Thanks, and folks of the interwebs, hope you enjoyed this tale, and thanks for joining me here to get a little GCD.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, well, check your six. Look in that garbage can, because you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.